Good morning and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am privileged to welcome you to grant writing workshop as part of 19th Shaukat Khanum Cancer Symposium. My name is Farah Asif and I am a clinical researcher. Following my medical graduation, I have some training in clinical trials as well as I have some training in ethics and regulatory science. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Khwaja Nasir. He is my colleague and he is physician of orofacial pain management. I'm also joined by Dr. Mariam Hassan. She is my colleague, a clinical researcher, and today she is taking care of the matters behind the scenes primarily. So the aim of today's workshop is to give basic knowledge and understanding of grant writing process. And to cover this aim, we have given it a structure. We would be covering it in three main sections. So in first 2 hours, we would give you an overview of writing winning grants. In the second part, what we will do is we will see the process of evaluation of grants. So in this section, we would review this process from the lens of the reviewer. And in the third section, we would open and we would invite you for question and answers. So to achieve this, there are some housekeeping rules, and I would take a few moments to cover those housekeeping rules. I would request all the participants to stay muted unless and until they are invited to speak. And they can always keep posting their questions in the question and answer sessions. So this will help us to collect all those questions and take them up in the question and answer sessions. Depending on the time, we might be able to invite the participants to put forward their question and discuss that topic with the pain trainer. So it is encouraged that all participants, they follow these simple housekeeping rules. Today, few participants have joined us as panelists, and this includes Asim Farooq, Fatima Khurshid, Humaira Naimi, Noor Muhammad, Sadia Hassan, Saira Salim. So these participants, they bring a diversity in our participants pool. Some are the beginners, and there are few who have written at least a dozen of grants. So we are looking forward to have a great discussion with them. Lastly, I am privileged to introduce my trainer, my speaker to you. Today, Dr. Suhail Qureshi has joined us as the trainer for this workshop. Dr. Qureshi is a molecular biologist with over 30 years of post-PhD experience as researcher and science educator. After receiving his PhD in 1990, he carried out his postdoctoral training at Glasgow University, Imperial Cancer Research Fund, and Cambridge University. Subsequently, he has served as a senior scientist as well as at different positions in US, and he returned to Pakistan in 2011, and he was at Aga Khan University Hospital and thereafter served at the Syed Babar Ali School of Science and Engineering at Lahore University of Management Sciences as professor and dean. In 2016, he joined the Institute of Integrative Biosciences at Seacoast University, Peshawar. Currently, he is serving as Vice Chancellor of Seacoast University as well as the Director of IIB. He has been the recipient of Outstanding Teacher Award. And this is such a great pleasure to have him with us today. And Dr. Suhail, I would request you to take the stage from now onwards, and we are looking forward to a great discussion with you. Please go ahead, Dr. Suhail. Kindly unmute yourself and
Done that.
This is great. We
Okay.
can see your screen.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everybody. Thanks to Dr. Farah for the introduction and to the organizers of the Shaukat Khanum Symposium for inviting me to lead this workshop on grant writing. This is an area, I think, which is requiring a lot of attention. There's a lot of new people who would like to fund their research. And somehow there are some impediments that are in their way. But anyway, I'm going to go through this, this workshop. And basically what I've done is that my 30-some years of experience in academic settings, I've pretty much condensed all of that experience during which I've done lots of grant writing, lots of paper publishing. I've condensed it all into this presentation, which I hope everybody who is logged on here, who is online, is going to find beneficial. So the outline of the presentation is as follows. The first part, I'm going to start with a general overview of funding bodies, and then I'll transition into writing a winning research proposal. And I've put aside 2 hours for this part, and that includes a Q&A at the end. You're all welcome to text in your questions, and the moderator will be taking these questions, and then we'll field them towards the end. We'll deal with them towards the end of part 1. And part 2, it's going to be the other lens. How do you review, how do you evaluate a research grant as a reviewer? This is important because when you're writing for somebody, and the other lens is important. We'll talk about what are the reasons why grants get rejected. And 1 hour for this, including Q&A again. Text in your questions, and we'll try to deal with as many of your questions as possible. And then the last part is where we'll have sharing of experiences from new and seasoned researchers. How did this start out, and what happened? I think that'll be quite useful. And then we'll finish with Q&A. And so really, I got to tell you this, I would have loved that this workshop was happening in person. In person is different. Similarly, I wish there was, at least one full day to devote to this activity, because if you really want to do justice to this area, then, you need to go through some writing exercises that I could, as the lead, that I could look at and, give you in situ advice as to the do's and don'ts. But anyway, we've got 4 hours, and let's try to make the best out of this. So I'll start off with, let's see what a grant is. A grant is a mechanism through which an agency awards and or provides money to fund a research study or other activities. Or you can think of it as a conditional gift or giving of funds, but there are strings attached. That means I give you something, and in return, you give me something back. And those are the strings attached. So a conditional gift, it's not a gift where you can do whatever you want. It's based on a set of conditions that, you will be using that money for something. And I would like to have some of those promises back. A funding body is responsible for identifying the problem that they want addressed, but the outcome is unknown. And so the last one is that the idea to solve that problem originates with the grantee. Okay, so think about foundations, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, the Gates Foundation. They're all, they've identified a problem, and now it's up to the grantee or the investigator to come up with a solution to that, problem. Why do people write grants? There's lots of reasons. I think top is love, passion for what we do. There's a reason for why we got into academia, and I hope that reason is to discover the truth, to create knowledge, and to disseminate it. And I hope that those of you who got into science because of this, or whatever you're doing, I hope it's all passion driven. And because if you want to do something, you'll need a certain amount of money to get that done. So purely for the sake of love for whatever it is that we do, curiosity, research, whatever, that's the top reason. And if you are in that category, then I think you'll benefit the most because you're the one who's going to be working the hardest. The second one is a good one, to gain financial independence. It gives the investigator freedom to use the money however they want. And that's why people say that, being a professor is the best job you can have in the world because, you don't really have a boss. You have financial independence. If you can get the money, you can hire people, you can do things the way you want. Of course, to advance one's professional career. And initiate a new program that is too expensive for your institution to support. Like the PC1 grants, large grants, if there's something you wish to do, if you wish to establish a center, and your institution doesn't have enough money, or even if it does, won't be able to sustain it, then that's a reason why for a large grant. Contribute to the financial health of your department or institution. There are activities that need to be done within your department, and sometimes you need money for that. Well, not sometimes. Money is always needed for things, and that could be buying equipment or whatever. Maintain pundit status. Experts in the field acknowledge your idea as important and worthy of support. Okay, so once you get funded, then and the data starts coming in and the publications start coming in, then you go for bigger and better things. And so because of that, you're well respected in the community because people think you've got great ideas that are fundable. Enhance the prestige of your institution. Well, yeah, I don't want to say this, but this is pretty much, it's a cruel world. It used to be publish or perish. And then there was, got converted to patent or perish. But along those lines, there is this thing known as obtain funding or perish. Increasingly, universities are running like businesses, and so they want their faculty to obtain funding or get lost. So there's a lot of institutional pressure on people. And then, of course, there's peer pressure. If you're working in a department where most of the people are funded, then through that pressure. But those things are not good. I think the top one here is the best one. That for the sheer pursuit of knowledge, passion-driven. Let's see. So start thinking about it. If you haven't thought about it, I hope, again, all the tips that I'm going to give you today, hopefully they will help you start thinking about the process. Start thinking about it, and at some point, just do it. But I want you to know that you got to do it carefully. You can't do a sloppy job with just submitting poorly written proposals. In an academic setting or in a hospital setting, or in corporations, grant writing is an important part of your career. It is highly competitive, there's no doubt about it. But you got to jump in. Worrying about rejection is good in a way, in that it gives you that positive energy to put in a really good proposal. Work with more experienced researchers, sit down with them, get ideas from them. learn the art. Typically, what happens in science is that you go through a PhD, and that means you've spent several years with your professor, and you know how the kinds of activities that he's involved in, and one of that will be grant writing, manuscript writing, and other things. And so you basically learn some of the ropes from that person, and real experience comes in during your postdoctoral training, where all you do is just research and write. And it's during those periods that you develop a little more confidence in your writing skills and your managerial skills, how you, as an investigator. So some of those things come in. It's really difficult for people to just one day get up and start thinking about a grant. There has to be a period where, of learning that has gone on. And so when you're talking to more experienced researchers, then eventually some of those conversations will lead you towards ideas that or problems that remain unsolved and that are worth pursuing. This is important. At least in my career, there's a huge amount of learning that has gone on from failures. I guess almost 90+% of the experiments I've set up have failed, and those a lot of learning went on because of those failures. Oh, Lord, sorry about this. Sorry about this phone. So you can't be afraid of failures, and you can't be afraid of criticism. The academic life is really about dealing with criticism. We submit manuscripts, and they come back, sometimes rejected, sometimes you have to revise them in a major way. So you can't. It's really a life of criticism, and you can't run away from that. And it's that criticism that keeps you going in a way that you get better and better and better over time. Perseverance is key. First grant that anybody writes is the most painful one, and the likelihood that it gets rejected is pretty good. But persevere. The second time gets easier, and third, sorry about this, easier. I don't know if that's a word or not, but I just made it up. But it gets easier. And the same with the manuscript writing. The first one is painful, and the second one, third one, and so forth, they get easier and easier. You gotta build a track record of funding. This is really important. I find that in Pakistan, people are not really focused on one thing, that they'll have 2 or 3 areas which are sometimes not really connected. They're just after money. Track record means that you are hammering away on a problem, and you want to devote your life to that. And at some point in time, you do want to try out new things, and so you start pursuing other problems. But this track record, staying in one area and just becoming a guru in that area, it's really important. And eventually, I think if things go well, stick to one area, then eventually you achieve this thing known as the pundit status, where you start thinking about getting, mega grants. We're talking millions of dollars. So start thinking about it. Don't worry about rejection. And, I think the key thing today is going to be that you got to spend a lot of time reading. Granting bodies, there are 3 types of agencies through which you can get funding. One is the federal agency. In the context of Pakistan, there is the Higher Education Commission. They have these NRPUs that you could apply for. Pakistan Science Foundation is another one. I think the cap for that is up to about 2 million rupees, 20 lakh rupees. In the US, there's the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation, and in the UK, Medical Research Council. etc. So most of the basic research is funded by federal agencies. And so if you want to do something really basic, then your best chance of doing that would be, to go to a federal agency. Although I understand that in Pakistan, the pendulum is swung towards the applied side significantly, and which is not a good thing because, basic science is basic science. You just got to do things. But basic science is also hard science. There aren't very many people in Pakistan who are pursuing basic science. But eventually what happens is that, whatever little you've learned, you start thinking that, that's enough, and you start applying it. But then when you start applying it, then you start realizing, oh my God, I don't know this, I don't know this. And so the pendulum swings back to basic so that you can learn more, and then, reaches some kind of a happy equilibrium between basic and applied. But too much applied is not good, and too much basic is also not good. Well, I'm a basic researcher. I love what I do. And unfortunately, I've had difficulty getting grants for some of the things that are near and dear to me. Private foundations such as Bill and Melinda Gates, Michael J. Fox for Parkinson's, Chan Zuckerberg Initiative for Brain. So these are specialized. The Gates Foundation deals with infectious diseases. And so, we're talking large grants here. And if you're interested in applying to them, then there's a letter of interest that you need to send to them. And then if they like the idea, then they'll ask you to submit a full-fledged grant. Corporation industry is a fair amount of money that you can have from industry. And, that could be just PI based. If the professor has good links with industry, then he or she could get money independently, or there is university industry research projects. There's also just industry sponsored research, and one has to be careful with that because corporations give for enlightened self-interest. There is a self-interest there, testing or evaluating their own products and also improving their image. Foundations give out of goodness of their heart, advance a particular cause, etc. Unfortunately, I don't know of any private foundations that give money for research in Pakistan. There might be some, but I don't know of any. You got to remember that the goals of the investigator and the funding agency must be aligned. All funding agencies, they have KPIs, key performance indicators. They have their own set of agendas. And of course, the investigator is also seeking funds, but both need to align. So for example, if you're writing to the Gates Foundation about, diabetes, that's not going to work. It would have to be some aspect of infectious diseases. So even if your idea and proposal are excellent quality, it will not be funded if the agency to which you are applying is not interested in your project. So, this relationship where, I'm going to identify the problem and you're going to provide me the solution, that kind of a mutual agreement has to be there. There has to be some firm understanding between the giver and the givee, and the giver and the taker, that their interests have to be aligned. So what are the features of proposals that sell? Some bullet points for you. First is understanding of the issue, problem, research that is important to a potential sponsor. How innovative is your solution to the problem on some of those issues that are critical to the sponsor? Is it Me Too stuff? Has it already happened? How creative is the solution? And the significant impact of a problem and the proposed solution. Okay, is the problem significant, or is it just, you know, a problem that really is not even deemed as a significant problem? So, you know, agencies, they will prioritize, you know, a set of problems and, you know, accordingly fund projects according to that. Expertise, the track record of the PI is very important. What has the PI done lately? Has he or she been an active researcher? Have they been publishing regularly? If you go through a period of, you know, 4 to 5 years of no funding, even 2 to 3 years of no funding, then the likelihood that you're going to encounter problems will be there. Similarly, the expertise, that is, you know, what is the education background of the PI? And is the project within the domain of that expertise? That's important. And then, of course, the quality of the write-up is important. These are the sellers, but overall, funding bodies, they like low risk and high probability of success projects. Not really good because, you know, that means, you know, that means sometimes not great science. High risk projects sometimes are the most exciting, but, you know, it's difficult to get money for those. Your proposal's key message: hey, this is a good investment for the funding agency. This is good for you. So, you know, this is a good problem for you to fund, and, you know, I promise that I will deliver the, you know, whatever the objectives or the goals that I have promised you. What's in these days? Okay, so interdisciplinary is in. And that means we're looking at outside legacy areas. Okay, so, you know, between, let's say, biology and computer science, between biology and chemistry, at that interface, legacy areas have become sort of boring. Best problems to pursue are the real ones. And best work is usually at the interface of different fields. Big is also in, it's not necessarily healthy, but you got to do it. We're talking, you know, the sequencing of genomes, mapping of the brain, for example, really large scale stuff, which is not really hypothesis driven. It's, you know, big data science areas that will generate a lot of data. And once you sift through that data, you'll come up with a set of hypotheses that could then be tested experimentally. And then, of course, this targeted research is in. These days, SARS-CoV-2 is hot. And so if you're writing a grant that deals with, you know, one or more aspects of SARS-CoV-2, the chances are pretty good that it's going to get funded. The process of grant writing is shown here. There's a considerable period of planning where you're getting yourself mentally prepared. You're reading a lot. You are working in a certain area. You're fascinated with, you know, a certain set of problems. And you're talking about it, you're reading about it, you are, you know, constantly thinking about this. And, you know, you're trying to come up with, formulate hypotheses and, you know, do extensive literature reviews to figure out what has been done, what has not been done, to identify gaps in the literature and whatnot. So there's a lot of planning that goes into this. So you can't just get up one morning and say, I'm going to write a grant. Similarly, you can't get up one morning and start saying, I'm going to write a paper. There is mental preparation that goes into this. This is 4 to 6 months, but you know, for large grants, it could be 1 or 2 years. I can tell you that during your postdoctoral period, where somebody's giving you a salary or you could be on a fellowship, the next step is, you know, getting into an independent faculty position. And in those positions, the university will give you a certain amount of startup money. But that startup money is seed money to get you going. So that seed money is used to hire people, to buy equipment, to get consumables and whatnot. And that's going to dry out in, 2 or 3 years. And then after that, you're on your own. So that money is there to kickstart your research plan. And so during that period, you're generating a lot of data, a lot of pilot experiments are being done, a lot of hypotheses are being tested. And so, in other words, that investigator is going to take, 2 to 3 years time to put together a very competitive grant. And then before that, if the area that the investigator is working in is the same area that they were pursuing as a postdoc, then that means you're looking at least 7 to 8 years, 3 to 4 years as a postdoc, and then as a PI, another 3 to 4 years. So the planning phase is there, and that could be extended, or for senior investigators, once you reach pundit status, then the planning phase could be much shorter than that, because you're constantly doing things, you're generating data, you're going to meetings, you're publishing manuscripts. Stay on top of the literature that is published in top tier journals. Top tier is the key here. Stay with the top 10 journals within your area, and make sure you read good science. Make a reference library. It's not too difficult. This is comes in handy when you're publishing papers. You've got a library that has the papers that you've read, and it'll be very easy to format that library into references. Collect preliminary data, and then adhere to timelines. So let's say that you come across a grant, a RFA, a request for application, and the submission date is like 2 months, and you're thinking, oh my God, that's not enough time. So I would advise you that instead of putting in a bad proposal, you don't put in anything, because the reviewer is going to be reviewed, the grant is going to be reviewed by people, and they're going to develop some impression, hey, what's this? Some of them might even get annoyed that this is not even worth our time. And if that goes on 2 or 3 times, then you're going to start to develop a bad reputation as somebody who is sloppy and who is a time waster. So I would advise that you don't do that. But if you're given 5 to 6 months, then you could do all of these things. Plan, do your literature search. If you need to do some preliminary experiments, if the granting agency wants some kind of pilot experiments, then you could generate that data during that. Some granting agencies don't want any preliminary data. Writing will require 1 or 2 months, intense writing, and then submission. Writing period will vary. Some of the granting agencies, they require long write-ups. Others tend to be not as long. So it really depends as to where the grant is being submitted and what the requirements are. Planning, an idea needs to fit with your long-term career interests, as well as we've talked about this. Is it going to be basic or applied research? That's a decision you got to make. You need to understand what the funding climate is like, how much money is there, what are the, how much money is the federal agency put aside to fund basic research, and how much for applied. So in some ways, you got to go along with what's out there. If there's no money for basic research, then the chances of your basic project getting funded are not going to be good. So life is a compromise, and then you die. That's what they say. So a compromise, compromise, compromise. You need money. Don't compromise too much. But then if you could somehow, convert some of that basic research or the ideas that you develop for basic research and, propose to apply them on a set of problems, then, that would be equivalent to playing the game. And I see a lot of investigators doing that. The grant is basically of basic nature, but then, in the does this proposal have any applications? They write a number of things. Some of those things could be pie in the sky, but at least they're writing that, the results, the outcome of this proposal will be useful for carrying out these things. Constant conversation with colleagues and funded PIs. Okay, you got to do this. You got to talk to people who are knowledgeable, who are experienced, who will help you as your mentors, as your colleagues. Understand the trends. Where is science going? And that's going to happen through reading. Blue sky ideas are risky. Talking stuff that is disruptive. So these ideas are not going to be received well by the study sections because they're going to think, hey, this is too risky. And science in some ways is kind of a herd mentality. Wherever people are going, there are a lot of followers. And then all of a sudden somebody throws in an idea that is disruptive and everybody says, hey, I don't think this is fundable. But then there are organizations and foundations that will happily, listen to some of those ideas. Know types of funding agencies and their respective goals. Creative hypotheses should be generated. Read extensively to identify gaps in the literature. It's remarkable how much low-hanging fruit there is out there for people who read frequently. And that means when you read critically, reading the literature must be critical because you're looking at data. And when you look at data, you identify, weaknesses in experimental design or what more they could have done. Meetings and seminars is always good. So all of these things go under the umbrella of planning. During the planning phase, you got to learn about your own institution also. You got to understand what the policies are and the processing time and the budget preparation. If your research proposal involves human subjects, then plan ahead. Submit an application to your respective institution review board prior to submitting your application, or definitely prior to conducting research. And approval from some of the RBs can take time. Don't take them for granted. Process of hiring, you should know how long it takes in your institution to hire somebody. And you should also know what the procurement procedures and timelines are in your institution. Okay, in Pakistan, if you have federal money, then you got to go through PEPRA rules. So for PC1 and others, and if you don't do that, then somebody's going to slap you on your wrist for, violating some of those procedural norms. Also find out what the timeline is. If your institution is taking 6 months to procure something, then you got to factor those 6 months into your grant proposal. And of course, you need to be aware of the kinds of facilities that your institution is offering. Because remember, you're going to be proposing something, and then you want to get the project done. And that means the deliverables have to be delivered on time. So the timelines are important, and whether you'll be able to deliver or not is going to depend upon one or more of these things. So first thing is that you identify the right grant. Okay, this is the funding agency, and this is what I'm eyeing. What is the type of the project? Is it going to be basic? Will it be applied? Are you eligible? Some of the grants are for young investigators, some are for seasoned, for more experienced ones. Who do they fund? And what is the duration of those grants? Is it a 1-year grant or is it a 3-year grant? Excuse me, what are the funding limits? And then are the funds that will be sanctioned to you, will they be open? Or that means open means you could do anything you want to do with that money, or will they limit you to do certain things? So identify the right one. And once you've done that, So once you've done that, this is a list of things to consider before you start writing. Is there a conflict of interest, human subjects, the due date, page limit, topics, headings, spacing, numbering? Do you need letters, Gantt chart, etc.? So a lot of planning, and important part of that planning is get the guidelines, read the guidelines. Get them, read the guidelines and follow the guidelines carefully. So we now move to effective grant writing. The quality of the idea and its appeal to the funding agency is important. And second is the ability to communicate clearly and concisely. Remember, a grant is not just an idea, it's a game plan. And also remember that there is no grantsmanship that will turn a bad idea into a good one. So if the idea is bad, it doesn't mean how good of a writer you are, it's not going to get funded. But there are many ways to disguise a good idea. Now, a lot of people mess things up. I see this in papers that the data is really great, but it's been poorly written. And so the manuscript keeps getting rejected. And then the data is not so good, but the writing is exceptional and the paper gets in. So keep this in mind. The quality of the idea is important, but so is how it's presented. Writing is not easy, I can tell you. I've been doing this for many years. And although I enjoy it, it requires a lot of perseverance. So it's not easy. One must persevere. It's time consuming. One requires focus, deep thinking. First draft is never going to be perfect. So those of you who think that your first draft is going to be the final draft, you're deeply mistaken. First draft gives you that confidence that you've put together your ideas, and then you start applying friction on those ideas, and hopefully that process of writing and rewriting will bring some shine into that document. But a well-written proposal is clear, focused, and concise. Advised, good writing needs constant practice. The more you write, the better you get. Reading builds vocabulary and improves sentence structures and style, so read. And this is particularly useful advice for Pakistanis. We're not a reading nation. We don't like to read that much. But without reading, you're not going to get too far in your academic careers. Okay, so I had to put this in because I think this is really messed things up. Gone are the days when people, most of the people would think before they begin to write, but then came this. And if you ever tracked how many times you deleted stuff and edited stuff before the final document, I think that would shock you. The old fashioned was you thought about, a sentence before you started writing one. And here you just start writing a sentence and then you think later. Okay, it's messed things up, but thinking before you're writing is important. The tips for grant writing, first is after the mental preparation, start with an outline, prepare figures, tables, and images before you write your proposal. Okay, all of these things must be ready if you're going to be including some pilot experiments in your grant application. Then those images, they need to be converted into nice figures that are properly labeled. If you need tables, then nicely put together tables where space is not wasted, the right types of fonts are used. Accurate, clear, and consistent. It's important to use the jargon correctly. I find that most of the people write long sentences, and that's not part of effective writing. Short sentences. The start of the paragraphs with clear, informative topic sentences. Know when to avoid highly technical language. Writing style, remember you're writing to the funding source. You're trying to convince somebody, hey, give me some money for this. So just imagine that if you weren't writing a grant, if you met that person, how would you do the convincing? And you'd be using, the same kinds of arguments. And all of those things that you would be telling them, now they need to be captured in words. You're writing to the funding source. You're convincing the reader that this is a worthwhile problem for the funding agency to fund. You're not writing in first person. Write to persuade the reviewer. Use data from reputable source, and that means top-tier journals. If you're citing journals that are, poor in quality, then that shows, where your bar is. Data, latest, old data is going to tell you that, this is this information is not up to date. So just, if the reviewer goes to the references and looks at the date of the reference, if you're citing literature that is, 10 years old, then that's going to be a turnoff. You got to establish credibility, and you can't just come up with, unsubstantiated opinions. We are people of logic, and so therefore, there's a way to build up arguments and to back them up with literature and good data. So unsubstantiated opinions, there's no room for those. They're turnoffs. So with that long kind of a preamble, which I hope that you found interesting and informative, let's move to the components of a grant application. So here they are, and I'll be talking about each one of these. Cover page, abstract, problem or need statement, goals and objectives, methodology, references, budget, and forms, letters, and certifications. Okay, so title is of obvious importance. It's got to be succinct. It conveys what the project is about, and it's specific. And, your title goes here. There's nothing wrong. In fact, I've done this all my career, that I write the paper or write the grant, and the title is the last thing that comes. But clearly, the title has to reflect what's going on in there. Next section is the abstract, and the abstract, or in some cases, a summary. Sometimes there's a summary, and then there's a layman summary. You got to write both of them. But let's just call these abstracts. So these summaries or abstracts, they should be able to stand alone. And you know what? It may be all that the reviewer reads. Okay, people don't have time. If you have a reviewer who has to review 10 grants, well, the chances are pretty good they're not going to be reading every single word in your grant. What's going to get them excited is an abstract, a summary that is clear, and that gets them hooked and connected, and then they think, oh, wow, this is great. Abstract should be publishable quality. It should be clear. It should be concise. Must have good flow. All the sentences must be connected. And within the abstract, you're not really referring to the proposal. There's a word limit in some cases. And in some ways it's good, because sometimes a funding agency says that you got to have the abstract, you have got 300 words to do this. And that becomes kind of interesting, because then you start counting each one of the words to make sure that, it's 300. Okay, one thing I've found quite common is that if your abstract makes the reader feel as if they've learned something new, well, that's good. But if there's something irritating in there or confusing, or if there is some, run-on sentences or dangling modifiers in there, or jargon that is, not necessary, some irritants, then it's going to be thumbs down. But an abstract or reading that makes the reader feel as if they've learned something new, I think that, that grant has a reasonably good chance that it's going to go into the next. It's going to be shortlisted. Next is the needs of the problem statement. Very important, because it establishes a framework for the project's goals, objectives, methods, and evaluation. Okay, that's the foundation, a framework. Critically important, and in majority of the cases is poorly written. People are unable to come up with a clear problem statement. That's what the funding agency wants, a problem statement. You've identified a problem, and now you're going to propose a solution. So it's important that the need or the problem is clearly stated. Explain the need and how you plan to address it. Cite evidence from top-tier journals, illustrate with graphs and charts. So here we go. The light bulb. After you've read the problem statement, it's like, okay, I understand. A well-written problem statement makes the reader understand the problem or the need and its importance, clearly describes how your proposal is going to address it, and then, imparts theoretical or conceptual basis for your project and your knowledge of the issues surrounding your proposed project. And finally, shows that your approach is a creative one. So you identify the problem, and in the next few sentences, you address what are you going to do to solve that problem, or to address one or more of those goals. Okay, so lots of questions to ask. What is the significance of the problem or the need? Okay, so this is both ways. From the PI point of view and also from the reader is asking, what is the significance? And what is the current status of those needs? Remember, I keep saying that you got to read, you got to stay on top of the literature. If you submit a grant and you're identifying a problem that's already been solved, well, it's going to be triaged. It's going to come back to you. Waste of time. What is the current status of those needs up to date? Will this proposal help meet those needs? And what is it really that needs to be done? What are the gaps that exist in the knowledge base? What previous work has been done to meet this need? And was it useful? It could be a problem that people have been hammering away for years, and they weren't able to solve it. And then comes another proposal that I want to solve this. Well, how different is it going to be? And what will be the impact of this study? So there's lots of questions that you need to ask to make sure that the problem statement is a good one. So based on the problem statement, we next move to goals and objectives. Objectives, I thought I'd put this in there to differentiate. Objectives are the steps that must occur to reach the goal. So if there's a goal, there'll be a set of objectives that need to be accomplished to achieve that goal. Remember SMART? Goals and objectives: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. Okay? So remember these things. So goals and objectives, they must flow logically from the problem or the need statement. Goals convey the ultimate intent of the proposed project. Break the goals down to specific measurable pieces, i.e. objectives, that the outcomes of which can be measured to determine actual accomplishments. And the opening statement of this section should begin with, the goal of this project is to whatever. As an example of goal and objectives, let's say that the goal of this research proposal is to determine the crystal structure of human angiotensin converting enzyme 2, which is the receptor for SARS-CoV-2. So that is the goal, that you want to determine the crystal structure. And to achieve that goal, you've got these objectives. So 5 objectives here. First, you would clone the gene, the cDNA, the intron-less, or the open reading frame encoding ACE2, clone that into a bacterial expression plasmid, express the recombinant ACE2, and purify the protein to homogeneity. That would be the second objective. Crystallize ACE2 protein under different conditions, salt, humidity, and then use those crystals to obtain X-ray diffraction data, use the raw data for Fourier analysis, where it gives you three-dimensional maps. And then, a culmination of that analysis is that you obtain atomic level structure. Okay, so notice these are the objectives, how we go from here to there. It's a process. Of course, if you're going to have problem with this, then none of the subsequent objectives is going to be possible. Okay, so I think I will, in the US, in Europe, for basic research, if you get funded and you're having problems, then the program manager, you call them up and you say, okay, this is what we promised. These were the specific aims, but now our data shows that, or we're having problems accomplishing this. So, here's a new set of goals. Would you be open to that? And they will say yes. Pakistani agencies would say, hey, you promised this to us and you got to deliver it to us. And, basic research, sometimes it takes you in different directions, unpredictable directions. And you got to be careful with that because, if you're testing a hypothesis and things don't, turn out your way, then you could be in real trouble. So in Pakistani agencies, I think they need to evolve in a way that, if it is a basic research project, or even if it's an applied research project, whatever promises they've been made, and if the investigator continues to have problem with some of those things, then one thing would be just to, just waste money. The other one would be, okay, well, why don't we modify some of these objectives and keep going? So this is an example of the goal and a set of objectives that must be completed to reach that goal. A well thought out project will have one or maybe at most two goals, followed by several objectives related to those goals. And then it will have many different types of methods that the PI will want to employ to achieve each one of those objectives. Okay, next is the methodology and what are the different tools that you wish to use to address those goals and objectives. So here, let's see what the PI has in his or her briefcase. What will be the different methods that will be used. So methodology is a game plan for achieving the proposed objectives. It's the most detailed and the lengthy section of a grant. If methodology is new or unique, explain why it is better than that previously used. One example that comes to mind is Bert Sakman's group, who won the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the patch clamp technique, which is used to study ion channels. From what I hear, that he went through about, I think, 15 years of, making sure of, not even making sure of, testing his idea. He was convinced that the technique would work, and he went through many people who couldn't make the technique work. And after 15 years, it worked. So there is the methodology, and then there is people, green hands. Sometimes, methods that are advanced, they require green hands. And if, in the absence of the right people, some of those, methods will not work. So there's a lot of people here that's involved. But if the methodology is new or unique, why it is, well, you need to convince the reader why it is better than what has been previously used. This is a section that is scrutinized the most because the reader wants to know what the game plan is. That you want to accomplish a set of objectives, well, how are you going to do it? And this section is often poorly written. It's missing, a lot of pertinent details. Majority of the grants are turned down because the methodology or there's an and missing here, or the experimental design is not, airtight. It's not convincing. Considerations for methodology is human resources. That, do you need to hire people? Do the Do you have people who will be able to use, who are trained in those methods? Space required, procurement, equipment. Do you have the equipment to do those experiments? What is the timeline in those methods? When, who, where, what are the available facilities, etc. So timeline, equipment, facilities, all of these things are important. Okay, so if you're trying, let's say, going back to this, if you're trying to accomplish these objectives, well, you need to make sure that, do you have an expression plasmid? Do you have a thermocycler through which you can PCR amplify the cDNA from mRNA? Do you have mRNA isolation kit? Do you have a facility through which you can express recombinant proteins? Do you have shakers? Can you grow bacteria? Do you have protein purification facilities so that you can purify the protein? And do you have an environment where you can grow crystals? Do you have access to synchrotron time? And if not, you better book synchrotron time, because that's where the crystals are going to be taken for diffraction data. And then do you have the software that you will require for analysis, etc. So just imagine this. And then, of course, you're going to need people. Will you have access to well-trained human resources to be able to carry out these things? And then, of course, there's procurement and whatnot, the chemicals that you will require, and the space that you will require, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, this is going to be a time-bound project, and probably 3 years. You need to understand, will you be able to accomplish this in 3 years, if these are the promises that you've made to the funding agency? Dissemination. All granting agencies would like to know, what will you do with the results? Okay, they need to put those things in their own annual reports. That this money was given to this PI, and this is the data that they've produced, and this is where it was disseminated. Will it be shared in conferences or journals, or will a book result from this, or chapters or monographs, etc.? Will there be workshops? Will there be publications or conferences? If you're producing materials, how will they be advertised, marketed, or distributed? Now, there are situations where intellectual property is generated through grant money, in which case you'll want to get a provisional patent, which will lead to a patent eventually. And in that case, well, you hope that that patent will be licensed so that the PI can make some money and the granting agency can make some money. And also the host institution can keep a portion of that. Those are different cases of PI, but by and large, if you're producing data that is open, then the agency will want to know, okay, how do you wish to disseminate that data? Okay, money matters. Money is important, and remember, you're asking for money. And that means you got to develop your budget in a reasonable way. And this is another typically weakest part of a grant. Please don't exaggerate or inflate numbers. My experience is that whenever things are done at the 11th hour, people, investigators in Pakistan, they call up sales reps from different companies, and they'll give them quotations. Hey, I need a thermocycler, let's say 9700. How much is that going to be? Okay, so he says, well, it's going to be like 10 lakh rupees. So at that point, you're not haggling. You say, okay, you put that number in your thing, the quotation is sent to you, and you attach that with your grant. That's going to be taken negatively, because if the reviewer finds out that the thermocycler is only 5 lakh and you're asking 10 lakh, then so much for your credibility. But typically these things happen because people run out of time. and want to do things at the 11th hour. But exaggerating or inflating numbers is going to go against you. Realism is key. Got to be realistic. Nobody has the know-how to come up with the exact number. Typically about, there's a 10% cushion that you keep from how much money you require in case of, problems. The budget obviously is reflective of the methods that you wish to employ to complete the work. And so this example of ACE2 that I gave you, all of the stuff that you will require to complete that work, you'll need to find out what the prices are. And plus 10%, put that in there. You don't want to run out of money in the middle of a project. That's bad. That means, by the time you've accomplished objective number 2, you say, oh my God, money's run out. Now what's going to happen? Materials, supplies, consumables, computers, softwares, if it's needed. But if it's not needed, putting in a computer is going to go against you because somebody's going to say, hey, are you really after computers or do you want to solve a problem? Books, journals, stationery, publication costs, rates should be inclusive of all taxes, so no surprises. Salaries, find out, how much your institution will pay an RA. Don't make up numbers. You got to work with HR or, ORIC to get those numbers. Travel, if there will be travel, cover flight, ground, per diem, lodging, etc. If you're going to be making use of centralized facilities, if you're going to be sending your DNA, your plasmids outside for sequencing, well, those are centralized services. They'll charge a fee. Similarly, if you need consultants, you need to know how much the fee is. But this is something to remember, that grants that are written in PKR, you might discover to your shock that, after a year or so, the rupee has devalued. That, it no longer, has the same value. So initially you thought that, a 9,700 is going to be 10 lakh rupees, but now the rupee has weakened and now it's 15 lakh rupees. Well, what are you going to do about that? So it's good to, well, I know that with PC1s, you can kind of freeze the currency conversion for that day, so that, if there's devaluation, then somebody will look at it favorably that, this is tied to the dollar or the euro. But this is something that can happen. Again, you don't want to be in a situation where you run out of money in the middle of your project. Adequacy of resources, review your budget objectively. Have you requested enough funding to complete the project? Important. Very important. Target your budget to the average award range indicated by the agency. So if the agency says that, our upper cap is 20 million rupees, 20 million, you don't want to push it all the way to 20. Okay, so they've got a pot of money and they want to fund as many proposals as possible from that. So you want to go somewhere midway, so you're reasonably positioned. You may need to demonstrate that the institution has adequate facilities to complete the work. I think most of the funding agencies will want to know what you have in terms of facilities. Appendix, if necessary, you can provide additional information that will help the reader. Curriculum vitae of PI, letters of institutional support, commitment, sample questionnaire, if it's a questionnaire-based study, or if it's an educational grant, syllabus, etc. Letters, a cover letter is going to be important because when you submit that grant application, you'll need to, I think it's a good idea to have a cover letter on top of that. You will also need letters of support from your institution. letters of commitment from co-PIs, your team members. And if it involves animal work or human subjects, then approval from your IRB will be required. Now we go to the quality of the PI and co-PIs. Who is the principal investigator, and why should we give him money? Okay, you've identified the problem, objectives, but then the funding agency wants to make sure that will you be able to handle that? Do you have the necessary background and experience to take on that project? And this is where you demonstrate that you're the right person for the project. Don't simply say that, see my CV, talk about your experiences, your publication records, include an updated CV in there that has, your recent publications in there, students you're supervising at the MS, PhD level, if any, etc. Okay, so, funding agencies look at the PI and say, okay, he has a track record. He is somebody who comes from a good pedigree. He is a serious investigator. And if we give him money, he's going to deliver the goods to us. So who is the PI is very important. Okay, so you're done with the first draft and you're beginning to feel good. And, but it's not the last draft. So you want to let the draft cool down for a day or two and then pick it up to make sure that nothing is amiss. Give it a read, revise, give it to a colleague to go over it and to give you some candid feedback. Edit. You're going to be surprised that the first draft is going to have a lot of mistakes. And the second time you look at it, you'll find some of those mistakes, hopefully. Edit for clarity and conciseness. Each paragraph, look at each introductory sentence of a paragraph. It's the most important part. It is all what a reviewer might read. Okay, start it off positively, powerfully. Make sure that all pages are not just solid text. That's just boring. Bring in images, graphs, tables, and use headings and subheadings, bold and underline. Don't use italics. Formatting and typing checklist. Okay, so now these are the usual suspects when it comes to, irritants, things that annoy the heck out of a reviewer. Make sure that your document looks good. That means margins, font size, spacing is required. Go with the guidelines, white paper, adhere to page limits, address all sections of the guidelines, make sure that the budget is balanced. Bibliography, you have your library and EndNote or whatever, and format it. Complete all the forms. Spell check. Spelling mistakes are terrible. They just irritate me. And so make sure that, it's all, there are no spelling mistakes in there. Proofread it. Use font that is easy to read and that is uniform. That's also annoying that, a sentence will start off with a 12-point font, but then ends in a 14-point font or a 10-point font. Similarly, line spacing, do not justify. Justification is also sometimes irritating because, the spacing between words gets impacted. Print the required number of copies. Make sure that the overall document looks great. Submitting your grant. Okay, here we go. Okay, I want to talk to you about the last minute panic. It's a cycle. I don't know if many of you know this, but panic begets panic. And usually that will happen if you leave things to the very last minute. Don't do that. Okay, last minute stuff is occasionally of, poor quality. If you had some more time to deal with the document, I'm sure that it would have more shine on it. But some of us, I think particularly Pakistanis, we are very last minute people. It's not good. But anyway, last minute panic, your panic means you're also going to be panicking a whole lot of other people. And it's not going to be helpful. Some relationships might get ruined because of that panic. But anyway, you need endorsements. You need to submit that to your grants office, to ORIC, the Office of Research, Innovation, and Commercialization. Give them enough time. It will require a signature from the Vice Chancellor or whoever. And what if the Vice Chancellor is away on vacation that week? What's going to happen then? So plan it, give them enough time, and so that, there's no last minute panic. Okay, fingers crossed, go on vacation. Nafil padhe jaake, shukrane ke, ho gaya sara kaam. And hope for the best. Okay, and you come back a few months later, you get this rejection letter. Uh-oh, this is not good. And I think most of us have a pretty good idea of the quality of the submission. But still, it's a competitive world, and there are a lot of smart people out there. So, you did your best. You put your grant application, but then there were better grants, and because of that, it got rejected. It's not the end of the world. Don't get too stressed. Success in this business means having 1 in 3 grants funded. I have colleagues who write, hundreds of grants, who have written hundreds of grants over the last, 5-6 years. And I think maybe about 10 or 15 were funded. Persevere. A rejected proposal does not always mean that the idea was rejected. Okay, maybe it wasn't presented properly. If possible, get the reviewers' comments and, rewrite, revise, and resubmit. Don't lose heart. Keep going. Okay, and what if you hear the good news? The grant is funded. Congratulations, you got the grant. Everybody's like, oh, Mubarak ho bahut bahut. And now your colleagues tell you, colleagues like me, hey, now comes the hard part. Time to deliver what you promised. And you begin to go from happy to, here. PI is responsible for the proper fiscal management and conduct of the project. You're responsible for meeting all the reporting deadlines. So you got the money, and now you gotta deliver the goods. And if you overpromised, well, you're gonna be feeling like this. If you underpromised, then you'll be, in this state. I think it's always good to underpromise and overdeliver as compared to overpromise and underdeliver. Key messages is that grant writing, it is a specialized thing. It requires time and a lot of deep thinking. It is time consuming. Not all excellent proposals will win, but all proposals that you submit must be winning. There is a method and craft to writing grants. There's nothing magical about it. But I will say this, that it's important to network. It's important to talk to people, to go to meetings, and to make yourself known in some of those important circles. Those things will help. The biggest mistake is not to write a grant proposal, is to be afraid, is to be a fearful academic that, there's no point in submitting one because it's not going to be funded. The biggest risk is not taking one, so start working on one today. And I think the one clear message that I can give you is that if you're staying on top of the literature, then I think a lot of ideas will come into you, not just the ideas, but how those ideas can be presented. All of those things are important. Okay, so that is, I believe, the end of the first part. And I am well ahead of time. We've got a good half an hour to take questions. So let me then see if Dr. Farah has any questions from the people attending this. I don't know how many people are online here, but
so Dr. Suhail, amazing. This has been just amazing, and this is good to see that 62 participants, they have joined through our live broadcast session. So congratulations to all of us, I believe. Dr. Suhail, what a great overview, and just what I wanted to hear. And you have covered all the key aspects, starting from the pre-proposal activities, and then what should go into the proposal, then do's and don'ts, and that has been just amazing. We have received a couple of questions, so I would start taking them one by one. So the first question that we received is from Mr. Nadir Hassan. I requested him if he could introduce himself, but unfortunately, I'm not sure. I just know his name. He hasn't introduced himself further. So he has asked a question: is it realistic to pursue basic research in a country like Pakistan? And I believe you already commented in your talk that in Pakistan the pendulum is towards applied sciences. So it would be great to have your thoughts on this. So over to you, Dr. Suhail.
Okay, so where there's will, there's way. And remember that word compromise. So I'm a basic researcher, and the way I've played this game is that I've submitted grants that are applied, and then the money that I've received from those grants, I've used some of those funds to do my basic research. Okay, it's not fair, but there's always a little bit of money that's there for you to do other things. Of course, you're not going to be able to do big things. And there aren't any international agencies that are going to fund you here because, the procurement time is so painful that, if you have a PhD student or if you're working on a project and an experiment has not worked, so that means you got to wait 6 months before you set up the next experiment. Well, what are you going to do during those 6 months? So I find that in Pakistan, if you want to be successful, you need to do a lot of these Einsteinian thought experiments constantly. Okay, you need to be extra vigilant about the facilities which you have and what you don't have, and really plan, and then come up with a set of objectives that are realistic. Because remember, I said that the grant administrators here don't really understand. Okay, they're pretty much, well, not pretty much, they are clerks, and they don't really know. I mean, they'll say, कि डॉक्टर साहब आपने ये वादे किए थे, तो इसकी रोशनी में ही आपने हमें results produce करके देने. And I don't think that's too healthy. लेकिन I think the short answer is, it is difficult to do basic research here. I think especially basic research that is experimental. I'm an experimentalist. I love the laboratory. I just, I don't like paper pushing, to be honest with you. I'd rather be in the lab or in the classroom. Lekin, all the stuff that I've talked about, the procurement, the well-trained HR and all that, life is particularly difficult for the experimentalists in this country. So all the chemists, the biologists, the experimental physicists, they're all struggling. Happiest are people who are doing theoretical stuff in silico. Okay, a computer science person, you need a computer, or you might require, high performance computing clusters for that, but you don't need a wet lab. Ek to wet lab ka apna kharcha hota hai na, running it, air conditioning, freezers. It's, it requires a lot of funding. Economists, mathematicians, theoretical physicists, they're all, it's good. You don't need labs. And like an experimentalist, I mean, my own research career has been impacted since I came back. But I will always love basic research. I'm a foundational kind of a guy. I think it's hard work, basic research. If you can do basic research, you can do applied research. And occasionally, I come across people who are applied investigators, but they really don't know about the basics. And there's a game that's being played, I'm afraid, where people are following the money more than their, passions. So a passion begins with a question. Hey, I'm curious about this. I need to figure out how this thing works. Okay. There's an observation, there's an idea, there's a problem, and now I come up with a game plan. How am I going to, solve that problem or quench my curiosity? How am I going to do that? So there's that part, curiosity-driven, and then there is money-driven. Okay, so, SARS-CoV-2 ki aarif aa gayi hai. And you really haven't worked on SARS-CoV-2. You're not a virologist. Lekin phir bhi you say, okay, there's a pot of money that I can have. So let me figure out some aspect of SARS-CoV-2 that I can contribute to. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so within the Pakistani funding climate, there's nothing wrong with that, whatever if you could apply that knowledge to gain more information or to come up with a solution to a pressing problem, there's nothing wrong. So even if you're doing basic research, तो वो जो is the project of applied nature, उसमें बहुत सारे लोग लिख देते हैं. Yes, it is. The results produced from this will be useful for this, and this. Lekin when somebody asks you, how will the data contribute to the GDP of the country? It's like, oh my God, what do I do now? GDP of the country? Well, it's going to take some time before we get to the GDP level. Anyway, but the important message for you, my friend, is where there is will, there's a way. And so if you love basic research, if there are some questions that are burning inside you, you'll figure out a way how to answer them. Make sure that Pakistan doesn't, mess up your curiosity, okay? That's one of the best things that any investigator can have. A driven sense of, of exploration and curiosity. So that's a long answer to your short question, but, stay the course, my friend. Good things will happen.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. I can believe. First, I would like to inform you that Dr. Nadir Hassan is a consultant pathologist. He has introduced himself as well. So, Dr. Nadir, I'm hoping that your question is answered. And I know of other participants who are sitting in the conference room as well as who have joined virtually. They have the same thoughts. So that's just great. So I believe their questions have been answered. And I'm sure my friend Saira is sitting there and she must be happy to that what her thoughts are, she would believe validated, because these are the challenges that basic researchers usually feel. So Mr. Wasim Javed has also covered same frustration that they may take long time to get the equipment delivered to the sites. So this can impact their appraisals, which are done on an annual basis and as well as their careers. So there are a lot of questions. So next question I would like to take is from Dr. Fahim Khan. He's a consultant psychiatrist at PKLI Lahore. So his question is, what if a researcher has no previous funding from his own institute to his account? Is he still eligible and some chances to receive extramural? So to add on this, my co-host, Dr. Mariam, is also asking, for early career researcher, this is always a challenge to demonstrate your experience as a lead applicant, like to go on to this path, to climb up on this ladder. The first step would be harder. as you said in your presentation as well, that it's the first grant and you get funded. Second time it might be easier, and third time it might be further easier. If we इसको हम थोड़ा सा उल्टा करें, so उसका मतलब होगा, what if someone receives a first rejection, and then he would, of course, he would go into a cycle of he might feel disappointed. So few words on that, Dr. Suhail. I'm looking forward to hear to this.
Okay, so academic careers, they have the share of disappointments. My own career, and when I talk to my friends, the example that I gave you of manuscripts, getting rejected and coming back, revise this, revise that. So first time is the hardest for several reasons. Because why should we give the PI money? The PI doesn't have much experience. So you got to show something that you are academically mature, that you are, sort of ready to become a PI. And I like seeing people. I like seeing people who have written review articles in really good journals. Some kind of a scholarly, some evidence that maturity is there. If you haven't published much in that area, well, I think a review article or some, decent quality publication would be good. And when you're reading stuff, a lot of ideas come in. But really, it's those things that you don't just get up one day and say, I'm going to write a grant proposal. Remember that planning that I was talking about, that you are talking to people, you've got one or more mentors, supervisors or whatever, a whole bunch of learning has gone on, you've written your thesis or you've read, papers, and now comes your time. So I think typically you start off small. The bigger the magnitude of the grant, the more the hyenas. Everybody wants a part of that. The smaller the grant, the easier it is. And, those small grants are meant to seed some of those ideas that here's a little bit of money. Why don't you, apply for this and then start somewhere? Don't lose those opportunities. Whenever somebody gives you some seed money, use it to generate some data. And there's nothing better than showing to the granting agency that you've already done some pilot experiments. You've got some preliminary data. That once you get the money, you're going to hit the ground running. That, you're on your way. As compared to a proposal where no experiment has been done. There's no preliminary data. So those are the kinds of things that give readers, reviewers, the confidence in the PI that you could do this. Again, I think the clinicians will also need to go through this process that, actually, to be honest with you, I find that there are very few clinicians who are good researchers because, research is time consuming. It's a labor of love. I mean, somebody like me, I don't really have a choice to go to the clinic. The only choice I have is to write grants. And so whenever you're given the choice, the easier option is to go to the clinic, But for somebody like me, if I don't write grants, well, it's the end of my career. And so that's why I haven't come across very many clinicians who are great researchers. Because, it's easy to go to the clinic and to make ends meet and so on and so forth. But if you happen to be a person who is deeply curious, then you're going to stay the course. You're going to find a mentor, you're going to find people, you're going to be constantly generating ideas, and you're going to be, sniffing for seed money. Any money that I can have from somewhere, I'm going to put it to good use. So a ladder is climbed one rung at a time. Nobody's going to give a new investigator $1 million to do their thing because the track record is not there. And it's going to be a big risk that here, it's like giving a gun to a little boy and saying, here, do this. They don't know how to use it. So PIs need to have evidence of, academic maturity, of good managerial skills, of, the kinds of methods that they're using. And I also find it useful that for new researchers, if they're piggybacking on, more experienced researchers, funding agencies also look at that favorably. That, okay, that this is the PI, but, he or she is under the wings of a giant. And so therefore, there's going to be good mentoring that's going to be happening. It's a team, and if it's a team, the team is going to win because it has multiple members. That's looked at favorably also. But I think I'll keep saying this, at least 2 to 3 hours a day needs to be put aside for reading. You need to be able to read 1 or 2 papers every single day, understand things, cutting edge papers, like, from really good journals. And you'll see automatically that, how ideas will come flowing inside you. So, Mariam, I don't know how helpful that was, but the key word there is persevere and don't lose heart. Okay, and hopefully, if you don't do that, then you're going to reach the pundit status, where you're going to start thinking about big mega grants, because you've published a lot, and you don't even have to be the HOD of the department. I mean, once you have financial independence, you are the boss, because now you don't need to go to the HOD. You don't even need the dean. The VC, you don't need the VC, because you've got a pot of money and you're into your own zone. They assign you teaching responsibilities, and you've got your research agenda, you've got your team. Yes, a lot of people are going to be jealous of you. People are going to be coming to you for reagents and equipment and advice, and that's wonderful. It's just wonderful if you reach the pundit status. Okay, so hopefully everybody here is going to become a pundit someday, inshallah.
Hopefully, inshallah, Dr. Suhail. We have already started to feel good, already dreaming of that status. So I would like to go to one of our participants who has joined us on campus. Dr. Saira Salim is a basic sciences researcher, and she has at least written, I believe, a dozen grants. So, Saira, we are coming to you. Can you kindly unmute your mic and you can start putting your question now, please?
Thank you so much, Dr. Farah, for introducing me. Dr. Suhail, it was a great talk, and believe me, I have learned so many things today from your session that are going to help me in the coming years, hopefully. I had a couple of questions. You have answered one of them already, but I just want to say here, I just feel like saying this, that if we put a grant application which is perfect, and it says that I want to study a disease pathway, the reviewers, the international grant makers, they just say, oh, there are 2,000 scientists sitting in America and Japan studying those disease pathways. You don't need to study those, so just switch to some simple study design, and just, it's not your work. Or maybe, in other words, they are saying that you are not intellectually equipped to study the disease pathway. So you just do some simple questionnaire-based studies, that how many people are using PAM in your country and how many people are using alcohol, and why they are getting certain disease or not. So my question really is that how to answer that mindset, how to change their thinking process, how to get noticed by them, how our application could be even shortlisted, that you are, we people are also capable of studying these things, and, their money is not going to go to all the waste. Some publication will come out, somewhere, which could be filling some knowledge gaps. So what are those brownie point comments that we can add to our application so that it sounds a little stronger, that they should consider us as a scientist as well, sitting in a third world country. And for me as a woman, because I think they consider all these things, that who is the PI? And some people, unfortunately, count all these things. Pakistan, woman, disease pathway, no. How to answer this mindset?
Well, okay. So my only answer to this mindset is not to worry. We are people of logic. I've never worried about my skin color or my Pakistani nationality when I submit papers. I hear about it from people that, papers that are submitted from Pakistan, they're usually turned down. I haven't had such experiences. I like to think that if you're putting forward a convincing argument, then I think there's somebody who's going to read it. And, if there's something really creative in the way you're addressing a problem, then I think it's going to seek somebody's attention. And if it doesn't, then, I wouldn't start thinking that, oh, I'm a woman and I'm in this setting, and etc. At least, I don't think that way. So I think if you're putting your best foot forward, if your logical reasoning is great, if the significance of the problem that you're addressing is great, if it's not Me Too science, then, having said that, an overwhelming majority of grants that have been given to Pakistani scientists, their deliverables have not been delivered. Okay, so if you are somebody who has a sound track record of publications, it doesn't matter where you go, I think you'll get funded. In fact, there are funding agencies like the Howard Hughes Institutes in the US. They actually give PIs funding. Okay, so if you're like, somebody who's productive, the money will go to you. But there is a general problem with people who are disruptors, who think different, blue sky. Like, let's say, I'll give you an example. The whole world is convinced that, HIV causes AIDS. But, I come up with a hypothesis that HIV is not the agent that causes AIDS. Well, oh my God, that's a Richter scale 12. You submit that to a granting agency and, you start wondering, how are they going to take that? You need disruptors. I remember I was in Cambridge, and this guy from Oxford, he delivered a talk where, in textbooks, it says that DNA and RNA polymerase are the ones that move on the DNA. Okay, they are the ones that are moving, and DNA is the one that's static. So he comes up and he goes, hey guys, I've got some news for you. It's the enzyme that is static, and it's the DNA that goes through it. It's like, excuse me, what did you say? That's in the textbooks. We've been reading about that for years. That's disruptive. Disruption comes from evidence. Okay, whatever he's talking about, it's not like, I had this revelation or this is how it is. Science doesn't work by shrugging shoulders that, this is how it is. We got to show people data. This is what it is. And so, he presented some data indicating that, there are some, these complexes, the replisomes and the transcriptomes, a complex that contains RNA polymerase. That's static, these, synthetic factories, and it's the chromosomes that are going through it. So, इस किस्म की अगर सोच है ना, तो then I love this kind of thinking, disruption. Because वो जो herd mentality है ना, कि everybody is doing the same thing, and then after 5 years they say, oh, it's time to rethink about this whole thing. By that time, a lot of money has been wasted, nothing new has come out. Now, these days you find there's been a paradigm shift in the way science is being done. Okay, biology is no longer about, one protein or one thing. It's about systems level. We're looking holistically at how the different gears work together to make the system work. And if one of those gears develops a problem, then how the entire system suffers. But again, I think coming back to your specific question, if the writing is good, if the ideas are good, then somebody's going to say, aha, I think I like this PI. And it doesn't matter where she is. So keep going. And I would urge you to not think that way. Don't worry about your gender. Don't worry about, you being in Pakistan. Just do good quality stuff. And when I say good quality stuff, I mean, working in Pakistan the same way as you would be working in Cambridge or, Bahrain. That you assume you're surrounded by a lot of really, intense people who are really, good, excellent researchers and maintaining that bar at a high level. But when you start looking around that, okay, the other thing I want to share with you is that there is this problem that deans and provosts and university presidents are facing, which is too many papers. Okay? Good teachers will tell you that publish a few papers, but publish really good quality papers. Don't get into this numbers game. Okay? Because, then you're just playing this game for the sake of getting promotions. There's no real deep curiosity-driven investigation. You're in the system, and if you happen to be in an institution where, publish or perish, but then I guess the axe is going to be on your neck all the time that you got to produce, and then you'll be looking for, stuff that you shouldn't be looking for. So I think majority of us are constantly in that frame of mind. कि और उसमें फिर हम ethics को भी compromise कर देते हैं काफी हद तक. In fact, I've seen grants where the pilot experiments, they were not done properly. And उसमें कुछ doctoring हुई थी, just to convince the reader that this is how it is. Those things are not good. लेकिन colorblind, nation blind, and just, keep going. I know that's going to take a transformation in your mindset, but do it today, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Suhail. So we have at least 2 more questions. The number of participants is increasing. That's good. So we can try to be brief, and I would request the participants to make the questions brief. So Asim, I'm coming to you. Kindly unmute your mic and ask your question. I would request you to be brief because we have another question from one of the audience. So let's aim that we answer that in next 12 minutes. So Asim, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail, for an amazing workshop. I would just, I have one this question that you talked about innovation in our proposals, and then at the same time, you have to think about the risk that we are going to take. And so I would like to know how to balance the risks and the innovation in one equation. And what are the specific things to consider while writing a proposal and balancing everything, that this is my innovation, but these are the risks, and I might not be able to do this by the end of my project, but there is a chance that I still be able to do this. So how we balance the risk?
Okay, so I recently read this book about a brief history of risk, and I think it's important. Okay, how human civilization has evolved, and where we are today could not have happened without taking risks. And there is a difference between a risk and a calculated risk, a guess versus an educated guess. So remember I said that it's a relationship that you have with the granting agency. I give you money, you give me data, bartering. And if somebody gives you money and, in a hesitant way that you said, well, I might not be able to deliver the goods to you, then, unki annual report mein kya aayega? Uski apni, remember, they have their own agenda. Okay, they want, let's say, HEC wants, jitni funding hai unke paas, they want at least 1,000 papers to come out of that. So they're looking at it from that point of view. So, ye cheezein, okay, so, a secret, an open secret among academicians is the following, and that is that you've already started working on a project for which you seek funding. Okay? So that means one is starting a project de novo from zero, and the other one is that you already have generated some data. Remember, it's a cascading thing. You received a grant, and uske bhi objective fill ho rahe hain, lekin uske ilawa, you're thinking about what's next. So, ab, innovation ke andar systems pe bhi depend karta hai na. If you need cutting edge stuff, and if you don't have a cutting edge infrastructure, like the example that I gave you, if it's going to take you 6 months to procure something, and if it's going to take you, several months to find good human resources, to phir kya hoga? I mean, you're the professor. There's only so much time you can put into the laboratory. You're at the mercy of the quality of the people in your team. Ab, aapne dekhna hai ki this is very innovative. I want to do this. Who's going to do it? Do I have the right people? So aapne apne ird-gird dekhna hai ki what are the chances that I'll get, well-trained human resources who can hit the ground running on the first day? And if the answer to that is, not really, then you've got a problem. Key is under-promise and over-deliver. If you over-promise and under-deliver, then there's a pretty good chance that you might become the black sheep, okay? Somebody will say, we gave you so much money, you didn't deliver. So agli dafa, when you apply for a grant, they might remember that previous experience and, bas ab gaye. When you're dealing with federal agencies, you got to be careful. कि आपकी relationship रहनी चाहिए उनके साथ with PSF and HEC. Make sure कि relations don't go south. Now, unfortunately, Pakistan में private foundations भी नहीं हैं. There are thousands of them all over the world. लेकिन चलें US में तो you can play this game. लेकिन if you're going to do basic research, pretty much you have NIH and NSF. लेकिन if you're working on certain diseases, so then you're also limited. If you work on epilepsy, you have the Epilepsy Foundation of America, who you can turn to. So you have to be careful. कि आप जो चीज़ submit करवा रहे हो ना, वो it's a nicely packaged, high quality submission, which has a reasonably good chance of funding. इसलिए, good mentors will tell you that, instead of publishing bad papers, don't publish any papers. क्योंकि आपका नाम होता है ना उस पे. So innovation, you got to look at where you are. What kind of innovation is it? अगर वो experimental चीजें हैं तो फिर आपने पूरा infrastructure देखना है. If it requires something else, तो वो भी देखना है आपने कि what are the types of things that I will need to complete the work. Okay, so let me give you a bad example. And my students tell me that I'm full of bad examples, but it doesn't matter. I'll give you a bad example anyway. You go to the kitchen that you want to make, that you're thinking of making biryani, for example. And you find out कि, इतवार है सारी दुकानें बंद हैं, आपने कहा हुआ है किसी को कि शाम तक बिरयानी तैयार होगी. You've committed, लेकिन दुकानें बंद हैं. You go to the kitchen, there's nothing in the kitchen. Well, it's going to be embarrassing. तो ये सारी चीजें हैं कि we need to think about कि हमने करना क्या, what do we have, game plan क्या होगा. If you need 5 kilograms of sodium chloride, तो be prepared for an accident. हो सकता है आपका associate जो है ना वो सारे के सारे को गिरा दे किसी दिन. And now if you need to wait 6 months to get high quality sodium chloride, तो फिर तो आपका project गया. So this is what I'm talking about. You need to be extra on top of things, almost unhumanly on top of things. चीजें होंगी, बिजली जाएगी, -70 का फ्रीजर जो है ना वो उसका टेम्परेचर आएगा -10 पे. We do live in the land of uncertainty, you know that. It's wonderful living in this country. It's an adventure. So इसी adventure के अंदर we need to enjoy ourselves and to keep our curiosity levels up. तो अब ये नहीं मैं किसी को कहूँगा कि आप पाकिस्तान छोड़ के चले जाएं. I think you need to stay here and get the work done here. जैसे भी माहौल है ना, whatever system we have, I think कि हमने इसी के अंदर operate करके चीजें चलानी है. And yes, वो sabbaticals के मौके आएंगे, लेकिन वो जो innovation है ना, that's not going to happen in 6 months. You have to be in that environment, okay, which is thriving, and where people are working 15-16 hours a day. एक वो होता है, एक माहौल होता है एक इदारे का. तो अल्लाह करे कि शौकत खानम में इस किस्म का माहौल है, ताकि आप लोग जो है ना 15-16 घंटे काम करते हैं रोजाना के, and it's passion driven. लेकिन there are very few people in this country who are really passionate about research. So आपके लिए पैगाम ये है कि science happens in the head. Okay, the ideas come here. Einstein was just as much of a scientist as I am, even though he never did any wet lab. He didn't have to write any grants. Okay, ideas generate here. Uski jo implementation hai na, that happens in the laboratory. There's a difference between a scientist and a technician. A technician is a cook who follows recipes. Usko protocols de di jati hain. A plus B plus C, you get this. बस वो है उसका एक procedural किस्म की responsibility है उसकी. लेकिन the PI is the idea generator. Innovation is coming from here. And I hope and pray that all of the people here, they are, constantly thinking about new things, reading about new things. And a period to बहुत exciting है. There's so much information आजकल, so many amazing things going on. So it's really overwhelming, the amount of literature that we're surrounded with. And lekin you got to keep going, you got to keep reading, and got to keep thinking.
Thank you, Dr. Sohail. We have few minutes for dedicated for this session, but I would like to take one question from one of the attendees. Let me just read it out for you, and so that you can answer this. So I'm reading it out. It is Mr. Yasir Hussain who has asked this question. Is it possible to get funding from citizens while keeping the research open source and the proposal? How does citizen funding look like? Is there a practical example in Pakistan? So Dr. Sohail, so please go ahead.
I think this is, it's been proven to be successful, and there's no harm in trying it, even though we happen to be living in a country where there's trust deficit everywhere. There's a lot of, health philanthropy, but there's very little, not very many people who are willing to donate money for research purposes. Lekin nevertheless, I think there's no harm in trying. Open source wala mamla, it's dear to me. Lekin I think there have been debates on both sides. It's publishing is a $1 trillion business. Lekin I am somebody, I like openness. I am somebody who believes there should be a journal of failures, failed results, failed experiments. We are not learning from each other's failures. Only the good results are being published. They can, I don't think you should be, apne zehn mein na, I think if you think you have a good idea, then by all means go for it. Don't worry about where you are. And there are some success stories, as you well know.
Thank you, Dr. Sohail. So this is important to know that when we are in Pakistan, we are in a certain context, and there could be disadvantages. There could be real challenges. For example, we need to see how many opportunities for training are there, how to get a mentor. That is important. That could be a challenge for few. We the, see grant writing is a complex job. You would need a lot of support. You would need a lot of support just to put together your thoughts, and it might not be possible when you are not relieved from your work, because this would need some dedicated time. So these are inherent disadvantages. In Pakistan, we might not get a fantastic support. Few institutions do not have grants office. So they need to do all the hard work, and they have to do all the small work by themselves. Like शायद उनको खुद ही अपनी छोटी सी cost भी they need to find out themselves. So when we do not have that support in the context, in the context of our country, it might be challenging. But as Dr. Suhail said, we should go ahead. So we have almost taken our dedicated time for this session. But Dr. Suhail, if you allow me, can I take another question from one of the participants? And I hope we can cover up for the time in the next in part of our discussion. So I am going back to Dr. Saira Salim. Dr. Saira, if you could unmute your mic, I would request you to try to be brief, and then I would request Dr. Suhail to be brief in his answer as well, so that we can start our next part of the discussion. Dr. Saira, please go ahead.
Thank you. My question is regarding the article processing charges. You have said something about that, but I just want to ask this from this point of view, that some organizations or some grants, they support the research, all the work you can do with the amount of money they give you, but at the end, they don't pay the article processing charges. Saying the reason, what I understand is that, they want to say that we are not paying for the publication. It should not come across like that. So how should we go for those grants, or what is the best answer to justify this, that my organization is supporting my research, but it is not supporting to publish, not giving me the article processing charges. So sometimes we just want to apply for those grants, to get your article published, because it's like, I don't know, $500 or $700 or $1,000, for the article processing charges. So what should be the justification for that?
Okay, so by the way, I've never had any problems with that. I think one of the reasons is that I've always stayed with the top 10 journals, and the top tier journals typically don't have publication charges unless you want to publish, colored images, etc. Lekin I think universities should have should put aside some money for these things. I think letters to editors sometimes work, that if you can waive this fee, that would be great. But I find that the lower tier journals are in the business of making a lot of money. They're the ones who impose these charges. But some of their charges could be extortionate, like thousands of dollars. फिर आपने ये देखना है कि the institutional lens ये होगा कि the journal, impact factor is not that much, and why should we be paying $3,000 to get a paper published in there? So, what I'm saying is that don't get stuck on this. First thing is your idea. पहले results तो produce हो, फिर उसके बाद देखा जाएगा क्या होगा. And so I don't think I've ever put publication charges on my grant, and maybe because, and ज़रूरत भी नहीं थी कभी. Lekin I know people, LUMS maybe, when I was the dean, I remember every now and then some faculty member would come up and say, sir, it's a good impact factor journal. और लेकिन उसमें फिर ये होता है कि you have some colored images and they cannot be black and white क्योंकि उसका purpose would be lost. So you can just focus on generating high quality data. And then you've got a whole bunch of journals to consider. और वो भी एक unhealthy game चल रही है आजकल कि people want their paper to get published in the highest tier journal. वो एक gaming है क्योंकि you get rejected, then you go lower and lower and lower and lower. अच्छे investigators, they will know that this is the quality of this work and this is the right platform for this thing to be disseminated. So I think maybe at Shaukat Khanum you can encourage somebody to have a pot of money that reserved for that. They don't expect that money to be automatically given to you. It would depend upon कि किस जर्नल में आपका पेपर एस्टैब्लिश हुआ है, वो एक्सेप्ट हुआ है, और चार्जेस कितने. Okay.
So I can see Saira nodding her head. She's happy with the answer. So I have received another question from the attendee, Sadia Shehzad. So Sadia, I have noted your question. We would come back to this. So just to be on the track, I would request Dr. Suhail to take us through the second part of his presentation. I'm excited for this section because Dr. Suhail batane lage hain reviewer kya dekhta, because he has a lot of experience, so that that would be an interesting perspective, and we are excited.
Okay, Dr. Farah, thank you. So now we move to, let's see if I can move this thing. So now we consider the other lens. And I think it's really important that when you're writing something, you also consider the other lens. Okay, how will somebody who is reading this, what will be their impression? And I think अगर ये दोनों चीजें हो जाए ना, both these things, so then automatically the quality of the submission would improve. Okay, let's say that your own grant was, if you looked at your own grant after so many months, how would you evaluate that? So we're going to look at the other lens. By the way, I was thinking the other day, how many grants have I reviewed during my 35 years? And I would probably put a number like over 1,000. I think पिछले 8 सालों में तो I've done. I used to be the focal person for HEC medical biotechnology, because of Pakistan में तो I think easily 700-800 grants ऐसे करके. And I have a fairly good idea who is doing what. I have a fairly good idea how some of the proposals from senior investigators, what they look like. Within a few minutes, give me 10 minutes with a grant proposal and I can tell you uske pluses or minuses kya honge. So let me just condense all of that experience here in the next 35 to 40 minutes on how does go about evaluating a research grant as a reviewer. Okay, so it's no different from when you read a paper. When you read a research paper, the first thing you should be doing is to read the abstract. Okay, once you understand the abstract, then you go to the figures. Okay, figure number 1, figure number 2, 3, and 4. Get into, a data mode. Understand what are the experiments that were done and what is the data that's been generated, whether all the controls, positive and negative, have they been done properly? Is the data being presented properly, or uska take home hai kya? And within half an hour, 40 minutes, you're done with the paper. That's basically the meat, not the meat, but the skeleton of the paper. Abstract, the figures, और उसके बाद, आपने discussion पढ़ ली है, and then once you understand then you can read the paper in completion. The thing with research grants is no different. So, quick read. Let's say 15 minutes. The reviewer picks up your grant, looks at the title. Aha. And then let's see what the title does to his mood. If it's long and wordy, so well, there might appear a frown on his face. Mood kharab ho gaya, what is this? What is this? What is this? Is this guy's testing my patience? Phir hum gaye abstract pe. And spelling mistakes, run-on sentences, theek nahi hai. The flow is not there. 5 minutes mein maine padh lena abstract. And if I understand it, if I understand what the thing is all about, and I'm beginning to feel good about it, well, great. Problem statement. What is the problem? How significant is it? And how does the PI wish to, address those things? And goals and objectives. Pe aage, how do they read? What is the goal of this submission? And what are the set of objectives that need to be completed to achieve that goal? Quick reads. So these are, and then the budget. So, Joe, you got to worry about the mood of the reader. How is he going to look at the grants? Quick read. 15 minutes mein usko pata lag jayega ki yaar, is this worth really putting more time in? Mera mood theek hai? Is it a learning experience, novelty value creation? So a good grant is going to suck you right in, like this lady here. First 15 minutes and you're going to say, well, let me read a little more about this. Overall, you've got to make a good first impression. Or ye bhi ho sakta hai ki the reviewer has probably 10 grants sitting there and might not be able to give you any more than 15 minutes as the first read. Then they have to score the grant. They have to submit their report to the granting agency. Ke why should it be funded? And uski weaknesses kitni hai. And they will be, once they sink their teeth into the budget, they'll be able to figure out ke how does the budget reflect the goals and objectives. If it's inflated, frown. And if it's adequate, it's good. Okay? So, quick read के बाद आपने देखना है कि वहाँ हो क्या रहा है. And of course, quick read के अंदर, I also flip through the references. I look through the CV of the PI कि उसने क्या किया हुआ है, track record क्या है, उसका area क्या है, expertise का, Me Too signs कितनी हैं, और overall उसकी reputation क्या है. And I also look at the references के how recent the references are. Okay, is the literature good or not? So I think with experience, you could do that within, 20 minutes or so. Okay, I want to go through this one by one by one. The reasons why proposals are rejected. All of these are, important. First, idea is great, but it's been poorly presented. Just terrible. This happens quite frequently. Very few people I know have good writing skills. Okay, technical writing is, I think it's easier than non-technical writing because jargon bhi aa jata hai and you're used to a set of vocabulary. And so poorly written means that things are all over, fragmented, there's no real flow. Lack of sufficient time. Well, if, like I said, not submitting anything is way better than submitting something that is of bad quality. You know your efficiency, you know how much responsibility you have, and you know how loaded you are. To uske andar apne time nikal ke you need to put together a proposal. And वो अक्सर मैं देखता हूँ कि लोगों के पास टाइम ही नहीं होता. And here I will mention कि ये जो concept है ना deep thinking का, focus का, it is so important to our profession, science, or a researcher. It doesn't have to be science. To research के you need to put aside time where you can just think about things, develop ideas. You need time to be able to write, and that means that you should be in a zone, undistracted. Like I do a lot of my writing, at nights or early morning, from 6 to 8, if I have to submit something, or like, once everybody's gone home, my real, productive thinking time starts at about 5 o'clock. Everybody goes. And if I need to, get things done in a hurry, then I'll take time off from my sleep, spend the night, not distracted, that I can really focus on what I'm doing. So distractions are going to get the better of you, and they're not good. तो आपने सारी चीज़ों को सामने रखते हुए ये फैसला करना है कि do you have sufficient time for a high quality submission or not. Nothing intriguing. Okay, you're Shakespeare, but you got no ideas. Great writing, but the problem statement is bad. It's not creative. Why should he give you money? I mean, it's a problem that is of low priority, और solutions भी इतने मजे के नहीं हैं, काम भी काफी सारा हो चुका है. So why? Poor quality data. You've done a pilot experiment which is not good, and you're showing it off as if it's great. वहां से पता लगता है कि how quality conscious you are. Or this is something you're showing to the reviewer. Literature review is watered down, is thin, it's outdated, it's not comprehensive. It doesn't have the right citations. So that means that you're not on top of the literature. That means, whatever papers were published years ago, bas aapki, that's how your thinking is, that's where your thinking is. New paradigms and stuff, state of the art, new approaches to, or new methodologies you're not exposed to. Common problem that when people are running after money, they sometimes forget, okay, am I able to do this? Or, background in nahi hai. I know people who have, through their connections, they have landed on very large grants, and they're struggling with them. इसलिए कि उनकी background नहीं. And, how do you manage a project, advising, how do you deal with data? ये सारी चीजें जो है ना, this, because PI is the manager of the grant, so it rests on the shoulders of the PI to captain the team properly. Again, वही वाली चीज के if the PI has no experience doing, wet lab research and wants to do a wet lab project, but then it's like, excuse me, you don't have any experience. तो वो फिर insulting हो जाता थोड़ा सा, because study section people review कि यार ये क्या, ये तो drama है basically. And you don't want, even though you're not in that room, for somebody to use your name and say यार ये बंदा तो बस drama है. That's not good. So I think जहाँ जहाँ आपका नाम है ना, वहाँ you just want to make sure कि nobody insults you. The game plan is weak. The idea is great, but how are you going to accomplish that goal is weak. It means that, वो जो key areas है ना, they will not be addressed properly. And typically that is a problem. I end up spending not a fair amount of time, but looking at the methodology, a look at it, क्योंकि आपको अंदाजा हो जाता है when you're looking at the objectives, what will need to be done to accomplish those objectives. In fact, it's kind of an interesting game that I urge all of you to play, that when you read an abstract, so just think about it. Just think about how, what type of experiments or what kind of study the lead author, pursued to get those results. So next time you pick up a paper, just read the abstract. Or abstract पढ़ने के बाद think about कि कौन सा game plan उन्होंने इस्तेमाल किया होगा to generate the results. It's fascinating. Okay, कहीं से तो शुरू करेंगे आप, and then eventually, चीजें बेहतर होती जाएंगी because you're working in a certain area. Let's say you're working in diagnostics, let's say, molecular biophysics or something like this. So, आपको पता है कि these are the set of techniques that I will need to use to figure out कि my polymerase, how much force it's exerting on the DNA when it's moving forward. So you've got all the biophysical methods in front of you. Or if you're doing diagnostics, so you have a tool set that you use to figure out whether the presence or absence of a sequence, or agar aapne koi proteins ka kaam karna hai, to, there's a set of tools that are available for each area. So similarly, when you're reading a paper, to aapne ye sochna hai, this will make it easy for you. So again, when I read the abstract or the summary, I already have some game plan in my head. Okay, these are the things that the PI, this should be the game plan of the PI to accomplish that. Then aap jaate hain wahan par, and then, you look at the game plan and you evaluate it. And if you see big holes in it, then you say, oh, I don't think the PI really understands the methodology that well. तो अगर उसको समझ नहीं है methodology की, तो फिर वो कैसे अपने objectives को accomplish कर सकेगा. Budget is another irritant. Too many proposals in Pakistan I've reviewed where the emphasis was on buying toys, including computers, air conditioners. It's an irritant. You're curious about something. So एक burning need होती है उस project की, well, address those burning needs. Don't get into luxury items. क्योंकि वो फिर, the reviewer is going to start thinking, this is too much. They're asking way more money. And then what will happen with those proposals is that somebody, either the reviewer or the granting agency, they're going to slash the budget. And that's going to be a very painful blow to the investigator also, because you estimated that I'm going to require, let's say, 2 million to complete this work. And now, because you were exaggerating, somebody has slashed that budget by 30, 40%. And now you have cold feet. Okay, in 2 million, I was supposed to accomplish, I promised them to accomplish, 5 objectives. Now they've slashed it down by whatever. How am I going to accomplish my goals with, the slashed amount of money? Also worry about, okay, if the rupee gets devalued, so then what's going to happen? But I've also seen grants where the budget was realistic, and then somebody really didn't understand the budget and they slashed it. Lekin, from the PI standpoint, it's really important that the budget is realistic and it's justified. Instead of just desiring a whole bunch of things, if you're requesting for consumables or plasticware, which is, beyond a certain level, then somebody's going to flag it. Okay, what is the basis of that? So in our heads, the Einsteinian experiments, the virtual experiments we should be doing when we're writing grants is important. Within that are human errors. You buy an antibody or an enzyme, or you're doing some immunohistochemistry, and something disastrous happens. So then you should have a buffer to protect you. Cost is greater than benefit. Well, granting agency is saying, I'm going to give you so much money, and I want a bang for the buck, basically. Everybody wants a bang for the buck. And if I'm not getting a bang, why should I give you money? So, and you know, both those things go hand in hand. Okay, I'm going to give you this much money, and I expect a certain amount in return. Okay, from this money, I want you to do this. You know, ये papers होने चाहिए, इतना impact factor होना चाहिए, वगैरह वगैरह. Oh, deadline not met. Well, once the deadline is passed, it's passed. Guidelines are not followed. Another irritant. Read the guidelines. Read. Make sure that you do what the granting agency wants you to do. Okay? Don't start criticizing them. Just go along with what they say. As with journals, if a journal has a certain requirement, so you got to do it. Priorities. Granting agencies have priorities. You know, certain areas will receive priority. Aajkal SARS-CoV-2 is a priority. Everything else is on the back burner. So your proposal did not meet priorities, though. And then lastly, incomplete. That they want you to submit a certain set of documents. If you're working on human subjects and they wanted you to have permission from the IRB and you haven't done that, well, it's incomplete. They're not going to have time to call you up and say, sir, your IRB approval letter is missing. Nobody's going to do that. It's your responsibility to make sure that the grant is packaged in such a way that, you know, everything that is needed as supporting documents, whatever, is packaged into one nice thing that's submitted to the granting agency. These are some books that I found that might be useful. They're old, but this is an art that goes back a long way. It's the art of presenting an idea, a game plan. And that art has not changed. It's the art of convincing somebody, hey, this is the best thing there is. Give me some money, and I'm going to give you the goods. Just like teaching. Okay, you know, you're doing something, you got to explain your reasoning properly. So I suggest that you read these. I find that the American grants are way too laborious. NIH grants are just painful. You need morphine sometimes to deal with them. Large grants, they require a lot of pilot experiments. European grants are not as cumbersome. Grants in the UK are also not that bad. The MRC grants, they're not that long, and they don't require any preliminary data. But if you have preliminary data, it's good. So I want you to read this. All the reading on one side, lekin the passion on the other. Without passion, these readings will just be information for you. Lekin if you have a passion for discovery, for seeking the truth, for making a difference in terms of adding new knowledge to an already existing body of knowledge, or innovation or new products and stuff, the wo phir you'll really truly benefit from these books. Okay, so I think I am done, and notice that I've left a fair amount of time for Q&A because I think it's important. I don't want this to be a soliloquy where, you know, I just ramble on and on and on. Let me give it back to Dr. Farah. And if there are any questions from panelists, participants, I'll be happy to answer them. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. It's just great. Great presentation, I must say. All the important things that is whenever we are writing, it's always a good idea to know what the reviewer would be looking at. So what are the areas where we need to put our attention and be sure that we do a good job. Can I use my power as a moderator and ask the first question here, Dr. Suhail? So this year, COVID-19, the global health emergency, it has been few months we are living in this pandemic. And during this, we saw that there was a surge in research. It looked rational, it looked legitimate. There was a need to know this novel disease. And then a lot of resources and a lot of funds were directed towards the COVID-19. And there was an amazingly increasing trend of speed as well. We saw unprecedented speed of discovery, publications, and then there were reversal of few publications. And we have been in this madness since last few months. And after living in this experience for a few months, if we reflect, how was it a good idea to go onto a fast track? And especially when it comes to the funds, to the resources, this is very important that we can take an opportunity to reflect that how it has impacted the funds, the grants utilization, because COVID-19, it emerged as a priority and many things were on the back burner, which were important, I believe, of course. So, and when I talk about the speed, I'm not sure if it is a good idea to always follow that fast track, because there were few grants जिनकी deadlines बहुत surprisingly a small deadline, कुछ दिनों की deadlines थी. Recently, I had a chance to work on one of such grants. It was announced by WHO and it was like about 2 weeks. I would agree that usme paperwork, there was not a lot of paperwork. It was simple. The requirements were simple. They were requiring a small proposal. It was just 6 pages. But I would like to know the reviewer perspective, that how it has affected, how the COVID-19 emergency, it has affected the game of funds. Was it good? Was it bad? What if we, Allah na kare, kabhi next emergency ho, is this a good idea to follow this same fast track again? So I would like to hear on this from Dr. Suhail.
Okay, so in emergency situations, when there's a fire that starts in somebody's house, it's an emergency situation. And so the first thing is you need to survive, you need to live. And your first thing is you run out, you take your precious stuff, and this is an emergency situation for the entire world. A lot of people have been impacted. I'll take you back to the Spanish flu between 1918 and 1925. Which killed, I think, an estimated 50 million people on the planet. And at that time, that's a pre-penicillin era. Technologies 19, they didn't know what was going on. Diagnostics were not there. But our first priority is survival of the human race. And so, these nature's genetic engineering will continue. New things will arise. People are blaming this on domestication in some cases, too much domestication. Lekin, regardless, whenever you have a situation like this, we all need to join hands together and try to understand, the agent that is at the heart of it and to be able to do something about it. And so from that point of view, I think it makes sense that worldwide, a lot of resources were pooled or were put to work to gain a better understanding of the virus, its biology, diagnostics, how the host interacts with the virus, disease progression, and so on and so forth. And I think in panic situations, remember that panic cycle? Don't forget the panic cycle, by the way. Just remember the panic cycle. So the world is in a panic cycle. Whenever you're panicking, sometimes, वो जो rationality जो है ना वो थोड़ी सी कम हो जाती है, because you want to get things done. And that's what's happening. A lot of sloppy science is being done. Every 2 weeks, there's something new. There's almost something new every day from the Oval Office. By the way, the world is about to become a better place in the next day or so, because there is somebody who thinks that they're omniscient, they know everything. So it's important. And during the last 6-7 months, I also understand that pretty much any paper that had SARS-CoV-2 on it got published, because the world was trying to learn as much about the virus. Uske andar quality publications bhi thi, not so good. So people took advantage of this. Still, on the vaccine front, you hear about news all the time. Okay, vaccine, 3-4 months ago, there were false promises that there will be a vaccine. Now you're looking at human biology, and B cells and T cells. There's a certain amount of time that they will require to learn what has happened to the body, and you're not going to be able to mess with the biology too much. But I think a lot of good things have happened. Databases full of SARS-CoV-2 sequences, they're there. We understand a little bit about how the virus is evolving. Some of the AI tools are being used to predict, viral evolution and what's next. By the way, we're all scratching our head, how has Pakistan been spared of the COVID-19 stuff? And beyond divine intervention, I'm also wondering, why, our neighbors have been impacted in a major way, but we continue to live our normal lives. Lekin, despite of that, we haven't been, hit that hard. So the short thing is that in emergency situations, it's important. Okay, you bring together, the community comes together. Uske andar, there's a possibility of a lot of garbage information being produced. And if there are 7 or 10 investigators and they have conflicting, ideas about virus, then they might get into arguments. And so, sometimes the real stuff gets lost among all that, because there's large scale confusion. And I think world in general, the scientific community in general, is not quite on one page with vis-a-vis the biology of SARS-CoV-2. Its transmission and, how the host interacts with it, and, its impact on the body. Etc. ठीक है Farah?
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. So we have a question from one of the attendees, Sadia Shehzad. I'm just reading out her question. She wants to know, what is the prospect of getting grant for a real life problem, like contemporary rehabilitation design for intellectually deficient persons, basic research in Pakistan? Dr. Sadia is an assistant professor of community medicine at Shalimar Medical and Dental College. So Dr. Suhail, we are looking forward to hear.
Okay, so again, I think the problem statement is the key here, that, you will, if you can convince the funding agency or the reviewer, okay, this is a pressing problem that is impacting the lives of a significant number of people. And, here is a solution to it, then you're going to get somebody's attention. Again, this is where grants fail, that they don't do a good enough job in terms of conveying people that this is a burning need. It seems like, there's a difference between a need, a burning need, and a luxury need. So you got to package it up in such a way. And if you do that, then I am fairly confident that somebody's going to give you some money to do this. The passion that you have for this is going to be oozing out of you when you're writing this and somebody's reading it, there's something about a grant proposal which is radiating energy. Can do. Failure is not an option. Then I'm going to, if you turn me down, then the next time you better be ready for a better quality proposal because I'm going to do this. So where there's will, there's a way, Sadia. And, if this is a problem that's near and dear to you, if the funding agency doesn't give you the money, within our own networks, you can talk to people. And I know some people who would be willing because, there are people who know people who have a condition. And, those of us who know somebody who's less fortunate, we want to help them. And if that helping them means giving an investigator some money to figure out what their problem is, we'll do it. Okay? So don't lose heart. And somebody, at PSF and HEC might not understand it, like, and there is somebody out there who will. So lots of luck to you on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Suhail. So yes, Sadia, if you have the passion, look for the right opportunity. And yes, as Dr. Suhail, there's a bright chance you will get it. So now I would like to go to Noor Muhammad. He has joined us as a participant in the conference room. So I would request Noor, if you could unmute yourself and please apna question bataiye. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Farah. Very nice talk, Dr. Yourself. And my question is regarding the improvement in grant applications for the beginners. Most of the cases, the applications are submitted and a letter is received that your grant application is rejected. But there are not details what are the shortcomings and how a beginner can improve these applications in the next submissions. So what is the process and how can a beginner can improve these applications in the next time? So I need to know these processes.
Okay, so it is a major problem here because the reviewers' comments are not shared with the PI. Okay, so here's my suggestion. Suggestion is that give yourself enough time so that the grant can be reviewed in-house. You are part of a community. You have colleagues. And I hope that they're sincere to you because this is peer review is really a beautiful concept where you get to review each other's, grants and manuscripts. So first draft, so remember the planning part, you're thinking about this, you're talking to people, then you put pen to paper, and then you come up with that draft, and then you have your colleagues read it. And particularly the senior, more seasoned investigators, have them read it so that they can give you their, open feedback. That's really important. Failing that, then you're holding your breath because you're young. If you don't have a good mentor who's caring, so you're pretty much, left in the dark. That will end up wasting a lot of time and it will end up demoralizing you too. Okay, the response is going to be Boolean, either it's accepted or rejected. So, we all need mentoring. And I'm afraid that, a vast majority of senior people are not doing a good job mentoring their junior colleagues. It's really, really important for organizations to thrive. And, succession planning bhi honi chahiye har idare mein. And similarly, passing of the, knowledge baton also needs to happen from, top to the bottom. So I think this is a problem. Lekin I think if you don't have a good mentor, then I suggest you find somebody who is caring. And देखिए दो तीन चीजें होती हैं. एक तो ये है कि the idea. How is that idea? In the US, there are I think there's a grants office in every major university that will help the PI to improve the quality of their submission. Okay, because within science, there's now a fairly large number of people who, for whom English is not their mother tongue. And the language of the brain is unknown. It's a biochemical language. It has to be translated into words. And sometimes a lot is lost as you translate that thought into words. It's a problem for all of us whose mother tongue is not English. The same with teaching. So, and the top universities, they have grant offices. That if there is some lady from China or from some other country who is a really good scientist but is not able to, they'll help them with this. I think it's a good idea for Pakistani universities to have that too. There's a grants office, a part of ORIC that deals with editing and just getting it internally reviewed. Budgets ko dekh lein ye wo, that once the grant is submitted, it has a fairly good chance of being funded. So I'm with you, and I feel for you. लेकिन वो ये भी कहते हैं ना कि जिन बच्चों के kids who become orphans early, they grow up quickly also. And you know what I mean with that. If you are an academic orphan that you don't have, a mentor, it's time to grow up really quickly. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. So, Dr. Nadir Hassan has a question. Let me read it out for you. Most recent scholars returning to Pakistan are US trained. Do you feel that the culture of commercial medicine in that country affects negatively their approach to seeking financial grants for their research? As someone who trained in UK or Europe, where socialized medicine is practiced, this may be a factor which may have a role in transplanting approaches to medical research and related matters from the West to Pakistan.
Okay, I'm afraid you'll have to read that to me again.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. So let me just open this again. So, okay, let me read it for you. Most recent scholars returning to Pakistan are US trained. Do you feel that the culture of commercial medicine in that country affects negatively their approach to seeking financial grants for the research? As someone who trained in UK or Europe, where socialized medicine is practiced, this may be a factor which may have a role in transplanting approaches to medical research and related matters from West to Pakistan. Is it...
How about if I pass the buck to Dr. Mariam or you to answer that?
Okay.
Is Mariam online? Or Shahriar is there? Shahriar?
Yes. Dr. Shahriar, would you like to respond to this? I believe Mariam is in the background. I'm not sure if she can come as a panelist.
I don't mind doing that. I unfortunately disagree with that statement. Coming from US, where Professor Suhail trained as well, there is no socialized medicine. There is commercial medicine, quote unquote, insurance-based or pay-for-service. I disagree with that. I think people who do believe in commercial medicine, they don't do that much of research. So we should not mix the two together. Coming from, from a research institute like Shaukat Khanum, where we are actively doing research as much as possible, we don't believe in that idea or that culture of commercializing research. I think that's what Dr. Suhail had been talking about as well, that with COVID going on and everyone putting their money into vaccines or better tests, it has become more commercial, but that's universal. That's just not limited to our part of the world or eastern part of the world. That's also actually what's going on in West. That's why everyone is actually spending billions of dollars right now in developing better vaccines so then they can sell those to other countries. It's not philanthropy. There is definitely some financial aspect to it. So yeah, I don't agree with that statement that Pakistan has a more commercial input to it. I think it's universal and we should not mix these two together, in my humble opinion.
Let me look. I'm somebody. I don't. I believe that in the quality of the idea. I don't do too much thinking. Okay, how will somebody perceive this, and how will what will happen? I'm not really somebody. I've spent 9 years in the UK and almost 7 years in Canada, and then another 9 years in the US. So I don't really. I just know that if I have a good quality idea, then somebody's going to listen to me, regardless of where I am. So I'm kind of, I think, yeoman in my thinking. I don't read too much into these things. So whether you've trained in the UK or the US, I don't see much of a difference.
So thank you, Dr. Suhail. I hope we have both sides now. I have a question from one of the attendees, and so it's basically, if we have a burning question, a burning need in Pakistan, is it a good idea to go to a national funding source? How the international funding sources would view this if there is a national level problem and seeking funding from international funding. Is that a good idea? Is that a no-no? So because the next challenge would be, what if, in spite of the fact that the question underhand is a need, is a priority, it's not being prioritized for funding by the national level sources, and we have no option other than to go to the international funding sources. So as someone who is also a reviewer, does it make a difference in decision making? That why would they look at the country as well? So please elaborate on this. Thank you.
That yes, they will look at the country. I think if the country has a burning need, and the country is not putting aside funds for that, and you're having to go abroad for that, then it's looked at in a insulting, in a derogatory way. I like to think that I don't mean to be too critical about funding agencies here, but I like to think that there is burning needs of a country like us, and then there are needs, and then there is luxury. I think all the burning needs, we have to address them. The fact that we take a hit on our agriculture products every year, we need to figure out why, because agriculture is the backbone of our economy. And so that's a burning need. And then there's a whole bunch of other things. But according to those burning needs or luxury stuff, you can also train people, build capacity. And that means that if you need to bring investigators in from outside to train your people, we'll do it, because it's a burning need. You can't live without it. But yes, it becomes embarrassing. Without getting into hypotheticals, again, it depends. What is that problem that you're identifying, that you want to work on? If it's a basic problem, which is interesting, and nobody's really paying attention to it, then you will have no choice but to go abroad. Like, the chances of getting money for basic research from abroad are minimal. I mean, these are problems. So we still haven't identified problems that are in the burning need category of Pakistan, that these are the problems we need solved as we move forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years. As a nation, we wait for things to happen before we wake up. We rarely are prepared enough to deal with challenges. Or preparation agar ho, to then you end up mitigating, jo bhi aa raha hai na aapke samne. So majority of us are not really prepared. If something happens, and then we say, okay, now we got to start running, and that ends up wasting a lot of time and resources, and you keep getting impacted. So from a policy standpoint, I wish that somebody in Islamabad put together a list of burning needs. These are the things we need. These are the people, this is the critical number of people, critical mass of people we need trained in this area so that, they can deal with solving this problem or, deal with problems that might be arising in the future. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. So I just read a comment from one of the attendees, from one of the co-hosts, about the earlier comments that we discussed about the research with some commercial interests. So one of the comments that we have received is that a research might have a commercial interest, but it's important to look at the intent that commercial research is trying to answer some really needed questions. So just because that it is with a commercial backing, it is with a sponsor backing who would finally make it a business. So it doesn't mean that research is bad or we should suspect that research. It is also the intent. So I just wanted to add that. So we have received another question from, this is Dr. Muhammad Usman Rashid, Senior Research Scientist. So it's a comment. Contrary to the West, where scholars are very open and ready to accept critical review to improve the proposal on a positive note, here in Pakistan, it's pretty different. It's taken negatively, and overestimation of their proposal or paper is pretty fine. What are your thoughts? So Dr. Suhail, Dr. Usman has initiated a debate about how the criticism would be taken.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think a professional criticism is taken personally, and that's not healthy. But it's unfortunate that some of that criticism sometimes is unfounded. Rarely do you find constructive criticism that will lead to the betterment of a proposal. And I think that's a function of the amount of time that reviewers spend with grants. There's not that much time that's being spent in terms of really sinking your teeth into this and providing that feedback to the person that these are the weak areas because of which the grant was not funded. And I really hope that HEC and PSF and other granting agency, they move in that direction to give some feedback. But yeah, it's different. So agreed.
Right. Essentially, yes. So there are always two aspects. This is unfortunate that feedback is not constructive, it is rather targeted. And a second unfortunate situation is when a feedback is given and the investigator believes that this is not rational, and in that case he loses the opportunity to benefit from that feedback. So the feedback is there to improve your project, what you have written. It's coming from experts. It's coming from neutral readers. So I spent a lot of time of my job as a secretary to IRB, and where we get to hear both stories. We get to hear from the investigators as well as from the members. There are few comments that they would give on table, and then there would be few comments that would follow. Maybe you would receive a phone call in which they would further elaborate their ideas. I try to look at the reviewer perspective. If a reader believes that this might need rephrasing, it's not clear to me, it's give it a try. It's possible that the reader cannot read it. It needs a clarity. So it's always a good idea to accept that feedback. So because if we would not, we would lose that opportunity. So it's like a peer review process, and finally it is for the betterment of your proposal. So here I would like to take a question from one of the attendees. So she is, let me read it out for you, Dr. Suhail. If the grant is from a good repute PI, but is asking for millions of dollars to start the practical application of some discovered molecule for making a drug, is that acceptable? So if I understand this correctly, they are asking if we are asking for an insane amount of money for a molecule that is already being discovered. So do you believe it is acceptable practice?
Okay, so this whole area of drug repurposing has been thriving for many years. If there is already a drug that is approved by the European Medicines Agency, FDA, and you think that it would be useful for another condition. So that would be a clinical trial, and I don't think that the company. So one thing is, if that molecule is still under patent protection, like that patent is for that indication, if you're free to use that for the treatment of some other purpose, so then I think you would need to, you will need a lot of money, obviously, for clinical trials. Is that what that person is thinking, Farah? Okay, the drug is already being used. If it's patent protected, so then they might have to talk to the pharmaceutical company, whatever. But I don't know if I know there are clinical trials that are going on in Pakistan, and but those are not the entire cohort. So they basically do clinical trials in different parts of the world, just to make sure that the people who are in that they're of diverse background and genotypes, etc. But you would be in a much better position to answer that. That how well that your institution is set up for doing clinical trials. Whether you have the right infrastructure for that, what kind of a condition is that molecule being used to treat, and how many people there are within your institution, how many patients there are. Again, I think if the argument is a convincing one, there's nothing stopping. Okay, so my naive thinking will remain that way forever. I think if you think it's something worthwhile and you have presented a strong argument that it is worthwhile, then nobody's going to stop you. I think the only thing that you will need to worry about, if it's for repurposing purposes, so then you will need to generate some preliminary data, a lot of preliminary data, using animal models and whatnot, preclinical stuff, to ascertain that it is going to be useful to treat a certain condition. Going straight into human subjects, into phase 2 clinical trials, because the phase 1 has already been done on that, tolerance and all that is there. So you'll jump into phase 2, but you need to do that responsibly, obviously. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Suhail. So I would like to add few of the hints, a few of the aspects that you have highlighted in your answer. So there could be a situation where we are talking about repurposing of a drug, that the drug is already approved for a certain condition, and now we are looking of its efficacy and safety in another indication or in another completely different disease. So there is a rationale to do that. And there could be another situation where we are dealing with novel drugs. And in the current pandemic, we witnessed both situations. Many of the treatments which were there for other diseases. Those were tried in clinical trials. And then, of course, it's a novel virus. We have to develop the vaccines as well. So a lot of research is focused right now on vaccines as well. So because Dr. Suhail asked about our capacity to do clinical trials. So Shaukat Khanum has the capacity to do clinical trials. We do have trained personnel. We do have developed the guidelines and the mechanisms so that we can conduct the clinical trials which are in line with international standards in terms of both scientific as well as ethical aspects, so that there are safeguards there. And so we have aligned our processes in a way that we have a sort of multidisciplinary approach. We have key departments, the clinical departments, then we have support departments. And when I say the support departments, I would like to say that our support departments now, they are well versed with the operations of clinical trials. Our pharmacy is capable of doing full cycle of drug management. So this puts us in a good position to participate in the clinical trials. At the same time, we have few limitations as well. We are not a general hospital. We are primarily a specialized hospital. So at times, recruitment is not very easy for certain conditions, because and we know that limitation, and we are careful that whenever a new project is coming to us, we carefully assess the feasibility and our capability to do that research, including the capability to recruit, including the required human resources and the capital equipment that might be needed. So that is in place. So having said this, I would like to ask one of the questions from one of the attendees. How is the intellectual conflict of interest identified and managed at the reviewer end during grants review? Dr. Suri, would you like to elaborate on this?
Yeah, this conflict of interest is an important one. There's, we work within, we need to work in an ethical domain, and stepping out of that gets us into a lot of trouble. Conflict of interest in terms of a person who is working in an area reviewing a manuscript of a competitor, that has to be made clear to the editor that this is what's going on. There's a lot of academic parasitism out there where people have become good at stealing ideas from each other. And I think it's really important for the funding bodies to make sure that there isn't any conflict of interest, so that if there's a PI who is working in an area, that their submission is not reviewed by somebody, who is their competitor. And that's why it's a multi-reviewer thing. You don't just put all your eggs in one basket. You don't ask just one reviewer to give your comments. Minimally 2, sometimes 3. And then the way the American system works is that you have study sections that, grants are reviewed by a section. They're assigned to different people, and then they come and talk about these grants. I kind of like the idea that after the submission, the PI is invited to present their project to a panel of reviewers, just to enhance the transparency aspects. So that, you stand in front of people, present your idea, present your problem, the budget and all that. And if there are any questions, they can ask you directly. I kind of like that idea very much. I don't know why it's not being practiced. It's a hassle, but I think now that we've entered the online world, I think it's something that should not stop committees from just, getting a PI online just to find out what is it really that they want to do. So that, you know, if there are some weak areas or whatever that impression is on paper, you want to make sure that, you know, the PI will be capable enough to handle those things or not. And similarly, during these interactions, their knowledge is more of their knowledge sharing that's going to happen with the committee. And I think you'll be able to come up with a much better decision that way. But yep, conflict of interest is important. That if a matter conflicts with your interests, you know, just let somebody know, okay, you're not in that position to deal with this matter. Just be honest. We're humans, we all have biases. So it's good not to put yourself in that situation.
So Dr. Suhail, do you believe that the mechanisms which are there to declare conflict of interest or maybe to check those, they are good, they are effective? Did you would the reviewer rely on the information provided by the applicant? So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I know that from a manuscript standpoint, many of the journals will ask you to name, you know, some names of reviewers who are in a good position to review the manuscript. But, you know, again, I think I'll say this as many times as possible, that if the idea is a good one, because this is a document that's been submitted to a granting agency, and if somebody's going to review it, but they're going to shoot it down and steal the idea and get funding from elsewhere, sooner or later, the world is going to find out about this. There's a little bit of that going on everywhere. That, you know, through conversations, you exchange ideas. In fact, I don't like the academic community anymore, because I think the sharing of ideas is not as much as it used to be in the 80s. When I was a graduate student, we used to go to meetings and we would be sitting around Nobel laureates, and they'd be like, you know, open taps. Information would be flowing out of them. Ideas would be flowing out of them. It was a lot of fun to attend those meetings. Now, majority of the people are, you know, tight-lipped, because information is $1 trillion industry. You know, these guys have companies. They don't really want to talk openly. So it's really no fun going to meetings anymore, frankly. So, but yeah, I think you also don't want NDAs, you know, all the time in your pocket, you know, non-disclosure agreements. You want to talk to somebody, can you sign this agreement, please? Because, you know, this is proprietary information. I don't want you to misuse it. But ek had tak to ho raha hota hai. There are ideas, and you know, these ideas are there, and it's pretty much first come, first serve. You might be somebody, if you had an idea 6-7 years ago and you haven't jumped on it, well, you know, don't be surprised if somebody else jumped on it and now has, you know, produced so much. So I'm reminded of the fact that somebody once said there are 3 types of people in this world. 1, people who make things happen. 2, who watch things happen. And 3, who wondered what happened. So I hope you'll be in the top category, who make things happen.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. And I believe you would be happy to take a few more questions. So one of the attendees, Dr. Noshin Yusuf, let me read her question for you. If a molecule is an anti-cancer molecule and now a biotech company has to be started to make the drug, is it biotech and pharmaceuticals can't work on it? So I assume she's asking about an anti-cancer molecule being tested in clinical trials, and now the drug, now it has gone to the making of the drug. So is it biotech?
Farah, can you repeat that again? My
okay.
Net is
no problem,
acting
Dr.
up.
Suhail. Let me just read it
Hello?
again. Dr. Suhail, if you could
Hello,
confirm
can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Okay, can you repeat that question, because the
Yes, I can,
internet
of course.
connection.
Okay. So I'm reading it again for you. If a molecule is an anti-cancer molecule and now a biotech company has to be started to make the drug, is it biotech and pharmaceuticals can't work on it? So is it better now, Dr. Suhail? Can you hear us? It seems to me that Dr. Suhail.
Oh, the net is acting up. Okay, so let me, if you can hear me, I think I understand the question. So if it's an anti-cancer molecule, and if there is a biotech that's going to be producing it, so then I would like people to consider biotechs as, sort of early pharmaceutical companies. A lot of great innovation is happening in biotech companies, and a lot of the large pharmas who are pretty stuck with their growth, with their pipelines, they acquire the biotech companies, their technologies, and whatever the drugs in the pipeline are. But in this case, if it's a anti-cancer drug, so then if it's already established anti-cancer, then pretty much you don't need to worry. If it's gone through phase all the clinical trials, and it needs to be commercialized, so then I don't understand what the next question was, because now it's in the hands of chemists, who are producing the molecule in large quantities, and it's being packaged, etc. Farah, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Suhail, and I believe yes. Once we have researched on the drug, it needs to be handed over to the manufacturers, of course, who might have been sponsoring the drug discovery process as well. I hope, Dr. Nasheen, this answers your questions. Dr. Suhail, we
Farah,
have about.
Can you ask? This was, I don't think because I didn't understand the question completely, I wonder if I did justification to her question, because, the internet connection seems to have weakened in the last couple of minutes, and hopefully we'll be back to normal.
Okay, great.
So if you can ask Nasheen, did that help?
Yes. So Dr. Nasheen, if you could comment, or you can write in the Q&A section. Is it, do you feel that your question has been answered? So we would appreciate that. And while you do this, I would like to ask Dr. Suhail. Dr. Suhail, there are a few questions that people would like to ask. There are participants who have raised their hands. And are you happy that we continue with the questions, or would you?
Yeah, we can continue.
Okay, right. So Dr. Nasheen, once again, we would love to hear from you if we have answered your questions sufficiently. And now I would like to go to Sadia Hassan. She would like to ask her question. So Sadia, if you could unmute yourself, we should be able to hear you in that case. Sadia, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Suhail, can you hear me? So this is really a very useful workshop. I would like to ask something about for the beginners. There are some online training courses for grant writing and like that.
Oh, what was it? You want to ask about online training courses, Sadia?
For grant writing, yes.
Grant writing. I really wish that I spent 2 or 3 days with all of you, because I think it would have been much more meaningful. We could have gone through some exercises. You could have worked as groups. You could have made presentations and that. But I think you can, there's a lot of stuff online. But the key here is generating that idea. So the training is going to be how to present your idea. But it's you who will need to come up with that idea. It's you who needs to come up with that literature review. Read, gaps in the literature, or something novel. Baki, it's pretty much, the presentation part, they will tell you, okay, in this section, do's and don'ts, etc. So yes, the world is your oyster. On the net, there's a lot of stuff, but what is it that you want to do? Okay, that's nobody's going to help you with that, other than you and some people around you who are going to you'll share your raw ideas and who can help you refine those ideas then. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. And at times, I'm not sure if Dr. Suhail would correct me. At times, we learn it better while we do it. It's and it happens with me at least that whenever I press the button submit, I would realize that, oh, I could have done this better, or maybe this clarity. So and I find this like, when you do something, when you just jump into something, it's always a great learning opportunity. At times, because all of us are working full time, so it's hard to get a dedicated time and ideal time and ideal resources and training. And after that, we can work on our grants. So it might not happen. We are lucky to have Dr. Suhail today, but doing it, I find that very useful, and I believe that it was a very good learning experience. So I hope that would help. So now I would like to go to Dr. Saira Salim. She has a question, and Saira, can you kindly unmute your mic? So over to you, Saira.
Thank you once again, Dr. Farah. And I have this question regarding the equipment that is added into the grant application, and you described that part from a reviewer's perspective, that adding too many equipment, even AC or refrigerator, it looks like that maybe that is not needed. We understand the reviewer's perspective very clearly, but is there a way around it for the writer, who is asking for that thing? Because maybe what I'm about to say, it sounds a little immature, but when I read the discovery of blood transfusion and discovery of the blood types, there is a gap of like 200 years plus. It means that a research needs time. Science is not created in few days. Can we change this rigid thinking of the reviewer to somewhere that, okay, maybe they will not be able to study all of this within the next 10 years, but let's help them find some equipment, buy some equipment. It will become like an infrastructure, a permanent part of their institute, their university, their organization, which will be helpful, will be useful for the next researchers who are coming in the next decades to work there. So let's take this opportunity to help them buy that equipment. I mean, I'm talking about now Malvina spectrometer or digital scanner, which are like £1 million or $1 million worth of equipment. So how a grant applicant can justify buying those equipment? That's my question is really.
Okay, so first thing is that whenever equipment money is given to you and equipment is bought, so then the institution gets to keep that equipment. A granting agency is not going to say after 3 years to return the equipment. So it goes without saying that the equipment is going to belong to the institution. The institution, not the PI. So after 3 years, if you leave, so then you're not allowed to take the equipment with you because it's going to remain in that place. Okay, so there are equipment grants, there is capacity building grants where you wish to enhance the overall infrastructure. But if there is equipment that is pivotal to the success of your project that your institution does not have, then it falls in the category of a burning need. First thing, convince the reader that the problem is a burning one. It needs to be addressed. How it needs to be addressed, it's through a game plan that will require this equipment and these sets of reagents. So now we're talking about, justifying that equipment. Telling somebody, look, iske baghair to nahi ho sakega. And, there are situations where if somebody says you can't buy that equipment, then you can go back to them and say, this project is not doable without that. Too many investigators are, just tolerating these cuts from the agencies. You should be going back to the agency. Look, I asked for 2 million and you've given me 1 million. This is the slash. I'm not going to be able to do this. Thank you very much. Here's your money. So, it's a commitment. So to summarize, burning needs need to be addressed. And from that point of view, every granting agency will want to know, okay, what is your existing infrastructure? Do you have a cold room? Do you have this equipment? Do you have that equipment? And you have to be honest and forthcoming. Okay, I have this. If you show that, if you're asking for a thermocycler and when you already have one, so then you will either hide that or you will justify the need to have 2 thermocyclers. Open conversation. They like it. One should always be ready for a kind of a random audit that somebody shows up and says, hey, what do you have here? It doesn't happen, but that can happen. So all granting agencies will want to know a few things beyond equipment. They will want to know how much space you have. So let's say you're asking for a lot of money and, to complete that project, you will need space. A majority of the people don't understand that space costs money. And, for Shaukat Khanum or for Lums or somebody else to give somebody, 2,000 square feet of space, well, that's money. In the US, space is given to you not automatically. You have to fight for it. Similarly, agencies will want to know how much time will you be devoting to this project. So they will want to know what the percent effort is. If your plate is already full and you're going to put 0% effort in there, and that has to be endorsed by your, higher ups, so, they're not going to look at it because somebody will have to give for you to put time into this. Something will have to give. So that's something I didn't go into. Okay, how much time will the PI be devoting to this project? If you're teaching 3 courses and you only have 20% time left on research and already you have 1 grant, well then within that 20%, you're not going to be able to do justice to another grant. So you'll have to talk to your higher up, say, I need a relief for that 1 course. That becomes an expense for the institution because they will have to hire somebody else to teach that course. So, it's not unusual for the deans and the HODs to talk money directly. That space is not going to be automatic. If you have $1 million grant, so then Shaukat Khanum might have a problem in giving you so much space. Okay, I'm going to require like 10,000 square feet of space for this. It's a large grant and it's for 3 years. So then, maybe some higher up will say, okay, why don't we hire a bungalow outside and, purpose configure that so that, you could do your stuff. Like, all of these things have to be discussed and endorsed by the higher ups before a grant application goes out. You don't want to shock people. Okay, here's so much money, and now I need space. And the higher, well, there is that much space here. Why didn't you tell us first? So I've packaged a lot of things into one here. Again, it comes down to, what are the burning needs for the investigator to get the project done. And I would really urge you, put together a budget that is responsible. Also, remember I mentioned this with the devaluation of the rupee. You don't want to be caught after a year and a half. Okay, now you will need twice the amount of rupees to buy the same equipment. That's kind of a heart attack situation. Okay, that throws a monkey wrench into the way you were thinking. You had a pot of money, you needed to buy this. So remember that slide where congratulations, you have a grant, and now one of your colleagues says, Mubarak ho bahut bahut, lekin now comes the hard part. Now you have to deliver. It's like, oh, right. So under promise.
Whenever I get a grant, I will remember that slide.
Okay.
I just want to add something here that I'm talking from my own experience and not just one. I applied for 3 big grants and the answer was more or less the same. They were like, why don't you go for a collaboration model? Such country and this university have this, fancy equipment, and you can just, collaborate with them and go there and do your work, and you don't need that equipment. Yes, all the work can be done. We can always go there, travel there, come back, and do this work. But what about the infrastructure capacity building? What I just want to emphasize here that reviewers should change their rigid thinking that what we are asking is not just luxury. We might need it to, develop our department as well. But thank you very much. You gave a lot of great advice there.
So since you work at Shaukat Khanum, and because Shaukat Khanum is a non-profit organization, you'll have a lot of sympathy from a lot of donors, because they know that this institution is not into making money. You're into impacting lives of people, enhancing the quality of people's lives. You're transparent. All your accounting is, out there. There's nothing hidden. This is a good thing. And this gives you a wonderful environment in which you can begin to, convince people that we're not greedy. We need something. But, that something has to be in such a way that, one is the burning need of the investigator. The other one is the burning need of the institution. Okay? And sometimes what happens is that your burning need, your requirement might be for, some kind of a very expensive equipment. Let's say a scanning electron microscope. You really want it because, you really want to do some ultrastructure of viruses and, novel pathogens that are coming in. And it's very expensive, and you will have to then, justify. And somebody, because there's so much money that's involved, somebody will say, well, there are these centralized facilities. If the volume of your work is not that much, so why don't you send your samples to Heidelberg, to Singapore, and they will do it for you, or, fly over there and get the work done. It's really getting a return on investment. You don't want to be spending $500,000 getting a machine that only 1 or 2 people are going to use. And if they're going to use, how much is it going to be used? Like, if you can justify that without a scanning electron microscope, Shaukat Khanum's operations will be, will be compromised. So that's a whole separate argument altogether. And then your top brass is going to jump into that, the justification key. And then private donors might even come in and stuff like this. So I don't want to give examples, like I've seen institutions make bad decisions on the basis that there is one person who needs a piece of equipment that's $500,000, and that's it. Just to satisfy that one person, you're spending $500,000. Well, you got to worry about the fact that what happens when that person leaves? Is that piece of equipment going to become a white elephant or not? So, money matters. One needs to deal with them carefully. And also, vis-a-vis the centralized facilities or some of these companies that are service providers. They will make peptides for you. They will make, oligonucleotides for you. They will do monoclonal antibody production for you. And similarly, they'll do clinical trials for you. Viva Systems is another one. They will do, using AI tools and, other remarkable technologies. They're helping companies with their clinical trials. And so there are these, instead of you developing a monoclonal antibody facility, just because you need to generate a monoclonal antibody, you can simply send the antigen to a company and within a few months they'll come back to you. So I think all PIs need to understand, what are the things that they can buy from various service providers. And if those services are not available, then that becomes a burning need for you to, develop that service or to develop that, the reagent or the product yourself in-house. So in this case, if you want a monoclonal antibody, so then you don't need an animal facility. They'll do it for you. They'll send you the hybridoma and you use the antibody for, whatever. But if you start telling the granting agency that I need this and I need this and I need this, so they will say, hey, buddy, $5,000 and you can have it. Why do we want to give you $50,000? That gets insulting a little bit, because that means the PI is really not aware of what's out there. So, budget is something that needs to be developed really carefully. And it's an area that's scrutinized also very carefully by the reviewer.
Right.
Okay. Excuse me.
I hope Sarah is happy with the answer. So just to inform everyone of you, we have around 25 more minutes to go. Dr. Suhail, आप ज़्यादातर टाइम आप ही बात करते रहे. So I would encourage here everyone, अगर उनके कोई questions हैं जो कि अभी तक हम नहीं ले पाए, they are encouraged to put forward their question in the Q&A box. And we have one question from Dr. Aisha. And she's asking that research grant opportunities nowadays demand academia, industry collaboration. Most of the researchers are scientists and hardly know industry. How we can overcome this problem?
Well, that's partly true. From what I know, there's very few companies in Pakistan who are doing really good R&D. Okay, most of the pharmaceutical companies that do their manufacturing here, in terms of the drug discovery process, making libraries, synthetic chemistry, doing synthetic synthesis and doing SAR and high throughput assays and stuff like this. None of that is going on here. And so I don't know any life science companies in Pakistan who are doing, cutting edge research. But in Europe and US, that's happening. There are contract research organizations. There are projects that are given to, pundit investigators. It's much easier to give somebody $100,000 or $200,000 or whatever, large sums of money, for them to, generate some data. And that data sometimes is proprietary because it's a contract. It's an understanding between the company and the person. So then, the data is given back to the company. It's much easier to do it that way because now the company doesn't have to hire FTEs, no full-time employees for that. So here's the money, you do the data generation, then you come back to us. I know that this is something that's happening quite frequently in the US and also Europe. Strong university industry relationships. But I think in Pakistan, I've been hearing that university industry relationships for a long time. And I don't think very many of those relationships have a lot of current flowing in them. I think pretty much most of them are like paper relationships. Similarly, my experience is that in terms of student internships, majority of the internships at companies are not a good use of student time. because there's very little learning that goes on during these internships. So I'm the kind of person, I look at, what the learning objectives are. I develop my courses based on learning objectives, workshops are learning objectives. Hopefully the learning objectives today in this workshop have been that you've learned, the nitty-gritty of it, and now of this whole area of grant writing. But now keep all those things in mind when you sit on your desk and start, reading. But learning has to go on constantly at every level. So coming back, I could very well be wrong, and but my overall impression is that university-industry relationships could be much more productive than they are at present.
Yes, I would agree. Just to inform everyone that we have 20 more minutes to go, I would like to ask Dr. Shehryar. Dr. Shehryar, are there any thoughts or any comments or any question that you would like to share with us? That would be great to have your thoughts. So please go ahead.
Thank you. So my question for Dr. Suhail is regarding the budgeting. I think, as you said in your presentation as well, that's one of the most sort of underlooked sector or underlooked section when you're preparing a grant. Are there any, and I saw that someone was asking this question earlier as well, are there any templates or worksheets that you look into that, okay, maybe they have covered this topic really well, I should look into that, and then use that as a template or a tool to guide myself to create it? Because I know you have to look into account. Sometimes you have to answer these questions that, for example, someone who's a junior researcher would have a really hard time wrapping their head around.
Yeah. So I think the projects are of such diverse nature that everything is a kind of a unique package with its own unique requirements. And, some of the commonalities are, your HR stuff, hirings, you need to, the reagents, the usual stuff. I mean, that you require for the project. But no, I don't think so. But once you get started on that, then, because your interests are within a certain domain, so whatever you've submitted, if it gets turned down, you can use that to revise things over and over again. Okay, so one thing I've left out is the power of 1 + 1. I'm a synergy guy. I like to think that the sum of two people's parts is greater than, whatever. So if you're dealing with two people, the sum is greater than 2. The power of collaboration. Too many people, are working in silos. And I think one way to break all that is to join hands. You become a force. If 1 + 1 comes together, you sort of become 11. And then 3 people together, you become 1, 1, 1. Particularly in today's age when one person is not a know-it-all. There are different, parts. The idea is to get a problem solved. So, you might require the expertise of a CS person, a biologist, a chemist. Assemble a team of people together. Collaborate with people. And I think that becomes a good experience, not only experience, but meeting of the minds, because you all are focused on solving one problem. Therefore, the product that culminates from those conversations is going to be quite a shiny one. And I don't find very many productive collaborations in Pakistan. I hope that, within Shaukat Khanum, you've got, a very, a very talented group of, clinicians and staff, etc. I like to think that there's a lot of collaboration that's going on, and that will become your strength. You've got basic researchers, you've got, clinicians, people from different areas, you have access to biopsies. Sometimes basic researchers, they have difficulty working with clinicians because, you know, the clinician is going to do what they're doing. They'll be operating and they will think, okay, I'll give you, you know, these tissues and you do the analysis. And at the end of the study, I want my name on the paper. And that really annoys basic researchers. You know, they say, well, this guy's doing his job. But really, I think a little more involvement from clinical people with research, and I think you could really have a wonderful ecosystem where the entire community will thrive. So that's an example for Shaukat Khanum, but it's true for any organization that if you have a team captain who is a unifier, who brings people together, whether that's a dean or the HOD, oh, the power of that becomes amazing. So that's intra-institutional. And if that could expand to outside institutions, oh, more the merrier. And similarly, there are people out there abroad you could be contacting. Just because you're sitting in Pakistan doesn't mean that, you know, the world is not yours. You could contact them, establish some kind of a connection. They want papers, you want papers, you want to learn, they want to learn. So I like to think that, you know, all of us, we are students, we are all wanting to learn and contribute. So you'd be amazed at, you know, how forthcoming some of the people are who are sitting outside Pakistan, not Pakistanis. And there are also some good Pakistanis out there who are sitting abroad, who want to contribute while they're sitting abroad. The idea is that if you really want to do something, then nothing is going to stop you from doing it. You just got to come out of your shell, explore the world, talk to people, and remarkable things will happen to you. So this is something that I want everybody who's listening, junior and senior, to understand the power of, you know, unification, collaboration, 1 + 1. Read literature, come in over the coffee or tea, talk about, you know, ideas. I remember many years ago, I was in Cambridge, and one day, John Gurdon, who won the Nobel Prize for stem cell research, him and I were sitting together, and he was having his digestive biscuits. He still loves digestive. I think he goes through a pack a day or something like this. So John and I were sitting and we're talking about, hey, how's it going, et cetera, et cetera. And that was before he won the Nobel Prize, before Yamanaka and him. So John goes, have you ever wondered why a small country like Britain has produced so many Nobel Prize winners? And, you know, for the life of me, I don't know. And John says, it has to do with the tea break. The religious 10:30 and 3 o'clock tea breaks in the British system. The entire institute, the entire department goes to the tea room and they have a cup of tea together. Some are talking football, some are talking politics, but there's a lot of people who are talking science. Meeting of the minds. And, oh, that was like, wow. So yes, did I want to have a coffee hour at Lums? Yes, but it was hard. It's just hard to get people together here. But I think you might think this is like, you know, sort of strange talk, but honestly, if you were to pool all of your knowledge together, you would be pleasantly surprised at how much know-how there is in an institution. It's not coming together. Surely, you know, when you have two people, you know, they'll find some interest that is going to be overlapping, and that's going to lead to some kind of a collaboration, which is going to be a very fruitful one. So the power of meeting people, the power of sharing information, and I think it's a lot of fun actually sharing information. Beyond, you know, roti, kapda, and makan, and beyond, you know, politics and other things, really learning things and, you know, sharing ideas. It's actually, I think one of the problems that people who read a lot have is that they just love to share their ideas. They can't just shut up. And I hope that you're surrounded by these people who cannot be shut up. Just constantly, you know, bombarding others with, you know, their ideas. And if you have people like this, then, embrace them, learn from them. So the power of one plus one, synergy. We shall be successful as a unit. United we stand, divided we fall. It's one of my favorites. It's a line from a Pink Floyd song. I think it's Dark Side of the Moon. Us and I think it's, I don't know, us and them. No, I can't remember. Anyway, united we stand, divided we fall. Remember that. Over to you, Farah. I almost got into Pink Floyd, but that would not have been a good idea right now.
But this is just great, Dr. Suhail, having this discussion. And I'm happy that we brought this aspect into the discussion, the power of collaboration. I had a chance to listen to one of them, a talk from the director of my fellowship, and he said that collaborate or die. And yes, this is a power. And you see, not having research collaborations, not having groups that adversely affect our capacity, how we showcase ourselves. So I cannot agree more with Dr. Suhail. So, and yes, within Shaukat Khanum, within Pakistan, there is a lot of room of collaboration, but of course we need to be open and share the ideas and be on the right path. So having said that, I would just like to inform that we have 9 more minutes to go and we would like to finish on time. Let me see if we have any unanswered questions. We do not have any unanswered questions.
Farah, there's a Yasir Hussain, and he's asking, what does a burning need to address curiosities feel like? Well, he says, does it translate into sleepless nights or a toast of morphine? Well, there's something about a person who is constantly thinking. It's a need. It's a burning need to explore, to find answers. And so, yes, I think it's going to give you sleepless nights. People who have a purpose in their life, they have sleepless nights because they're on a mission. Oh, by the way, there are people who I call clockers, and then there are people who I call missionaries. Clockers, spend their professional life, looking at the clock. 8 baje aa gaye aur 5 baje chale gaye. Kaam hua na hua. Missionaries are a different breed altogether. Can do it. So, isme, it'll be, I think, a wonderful life if it is a life which is devoted to learning new things, sharing ideas with people. And just because you don't have that privilege to do the experiments yourself doesn't stop you from exciting your students or your colleagues. Okay, staying on top of things, knowing what is out there and disseminating that information itself, feels wonderful. I've been teaching for many years, and teaching is something I can't get rid of. I'm the vice chancellor, but still I teach 2 courses every semester. It's important for me. Otherwise, I think I would lose that purpose in my life. I never got into science to do paper pushing. I got into science, for the love of it, to discover new things, to be that only one person in the whole world who knows about something that nobody else does. So when you leave a laboratory knowing a certain result, well, at that juncture, you're the only person on this entire universe, entire world, who knows about that. And that's quite a privilege. And so it's, that kind of a driving force that has kept me going, and, it's showing no signs of waning. So again, I hope and pray that, all of you who are here are passionate about learning and about thinking and about developing new ideas and impacting lives. And I think Farah is going to tell us that we've got 5 more minutes left.
Yes.
I could go on a lot longer. And again, my desire is that I wish we were physically, in front of each other. And I think the interaction could have been possibly more meaningful, but it's online. But hopefully, I think I've made the best of it, hopefully. So back to you, Farah, with 4 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail. This was the best utilization of the time, and thank you so much. So we have gone through the overview of grant writing process, and we have not just followed the overview given by Dr. Suhail. We have benefited a lot from the questions. So we need to remember that there are things that we need to consider before we start jumping. We would jump to write. We need to look at the grant proposal. We need to look at the call. We need to check if our idea is within the scope of the grant. It is in line with the commitments of the institution. And can we do this? So do we have the right team to do this? So this is important. And then moving on to the writing part, it is always a good idea to give due attention to your to the requirements as spelled out in the grant call of the grant, and meet those. Give due attention to your title, your abstract, every part of your grant proposal, so that your objectives, your work plan, and your outcome, they are in line, and you can deliver what you are aiming at the outset. This is very important. And then this is important to, and yes, your budget should be in line with your work plan. Do not go into the temptation of asking for a big budget. So think about it, because this is an area the reviewer is going to scrutinize a lot. So because I would like to finish on time, and I am hoping that we have taken all the questions. There are few words of praise for Dr. Suhail. There are few people who have just written their remarks and they're so happy to attend this workshop. And there are few who would like to connect to Dr. Suhail as well, and I would ask for his permission following this workshop. So here I would like to thank Dr. Suhail for being patient at the moments when I was panicked, and I reached you out at a panic moment, and I was just smiling when I saw that cycle of panic. But thank you so much. It's a privilege to know you. It's a privilege to have an opportunity to attend this workshop. It was such a nice experience to have our participants with us. Amazing questions and amazing discussions. So discussion is बेहतर नहीं हो सकती थी if we would not have your interactions. So I would thank Dr. Shehryar for being with us for all the time. Thank you so much, Dr. Shehryar. I would thank Mariam. Yes, I would thank Mariam. She's behind the scenes, but she's my main support today. Thank you, Mariam. And I would thank Sumaira for letting us do what we wanted to do, letting us do the experiment of going virtual and still able to be able to interact with our participants. So thanks for having that trust on us. Thanks for the symposium committee. Thanks everyone. Thanks to the IT team. So with this, I would like to say bye-bye to everyone, and this is the time we would finish our interaction for today, and we will be in touch again. Ji, Dr. Suhail.
I'll take a minute to thank everybody who's here. I'm always happy to help any way I can. I can be reached very easily. And feel free to write to me. Feel free to submit your drafts to me for some comments if you don't have the right people in your institution. So I'm always happy to help. And I'm not somebody who's looking for authorships or co-PI-ships with you. This is a part of my job that I do, and I'm a blessed one because I love what I do. And Farah, thank you for moderating this, and all the people who were involved with this. I like this. Is that Naga Parvat or something that you have here? The Shaukat Khanum Cancer Symposium that is full of ice, snow. It's been keeping me refreshed for the last 4 hours. But anyway, it's been a joy contributing to this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.